welcome to Edward and to Lynn, who is on Zoom, Lynn Carter, our iwi representative, and to Edward, good to have you here. We have an agenda which is relatively full, but in the meantime, are there any apologies?
Hillary Calvert.
Apology, Councillor Kilbert.
Do you want some water? I've got some.
All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Attendance staff are here. Are there any additional staff that we need to know about?
No, they'll be introduced as per each item.
Confirmation of the agenda. No conflicts of interest. No public forum. Confirmation of the minutes of the 13th of May. And also I'll do them both, corrected minutes of the 22nd of January. Happy to move by Kate, seconded by Carmen. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Actions. Right. Anybody want to note the actions for me?
In progress.
Oh, yes, that's right. How long are we away from that happening? Chief Executive Sarah.
Yes. Yes, so that action's on there now as a result of that amendment to those minutes. So I'm working with staff in terms of working out when we can
Kate raised.
bring that back.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so the answer to that question is we don't know.
No, it's not an action.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll let
no,
you
thank
know.
you. Okay. All right, thank you. Now, Edward, do you want to do it now or do you want to go to your
Over to you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Just prior to the meeting, can I tell you there's an issue that's not on the item, and that is that a letter went from the Forurunanga to the Minister for the Environment, and it was provided to councillors about a week ago, Edward?
Tuesday, the 30th of June, I think.
Right, thank you. A couple of weeks, yeah, about a week ago. And there have been questions that councillors have had of that. So I've asked Edward if he just explain to us what that's about and what the context is, and he's very kindly said, yes, I'm happy to do that. Edward, my friend, go for your life.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity. I hadn't seen it on the agenda, so
No, that's
I hadn't
fine.
prepared myself, but I am aware there are questions around the letter to the Minister for the Environment. The Runanga position is that the deemed permits that have been trickling through have been processed under the old plan, have been getting long-term consents. We're very concerned that they're not being caught up and driven through the National Policy Statement on Freshwater Management. So the durations are long and the conditions are soft. And then we're aware that there's a looming number pending, and we're looking at the calendar left to process these deemed consents, and it's not clear to us that that's going to be tidy for us, our resources, but more importantly, getting good outcomes for our water in Otago. So the Runanga took the view that we best seek the Minister to have a look at this, to give some instruction or give some direction that these deemed permits, which have been on the horizon for 29 years, are addressed appropriately under standards appropriate for this time. We have been patient, the Runanga and Ngāi Tahu, for a long time, and we have been growing increasingly impatient, you might be aware, in the recent years. Thanks. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Yes, Brian, Councillor Brian.
I would like our CE to maybe just assist us in terms of discussing this really important issue. And in fact, there is a report in this regard later on, I think, in this committee. Yeah. And my understanding is that in terms of hearing and resolving these permits, that due consideration should be made of existing and potential new plans in terms of that balance. But the report that was given is as Edward has said, in terms of we were given in terms of deemed permits and the length of those permits, they were long and soft.
Yeah.
And so where to from here in relation to their adjudication?
I did signal to you all that I thought it was probably better that we discuss this in Regulatory Committee, which is tomorrow. However, in general terms, we have been made aware that we should expect the bulk, as I understand it, of these permits in the spring, the Manuherikia catchment permits particularly in the spring. That I would think is an interesting proposition, given that the hydrology work that is required for the catchment is not complete and has been worked on inside of the MRG. If permits are lodged in the springtime, the Plan Change 7 will have progressed and gained further weight throughout that process. We don't yet know what the timetable is for the Environment Court. So that is something to consider. So it really depends on where in the process Plan Change 7 has got to, as to how much weight that is afforded. At the moment, it has to be given. It has effect, but the weighting of that effect by a recent decision of hearing commissioner is very limited, which has resulted in the granting of a term, contrary to staff advice, I think of 25 years or 20 years, one or the other. I think that the intent to put these applications in early, or there is nothing that prohibits or precludes people from making applications at any time, should they want to do that. And we don't have a mechanism by which we can not accept them if they meet all of the criteria for an application in terms of completeness and in terms of the information required. So they would need to be considered. What I understand from our runanga is the request has been made to the Minister to consider a call-in process. If that were to happen, then I think the applications would likely be considered together, as is suggested by the runanga.
Thank you. And a supplementary comment. Surely, based on the feedback and direction by Minister Parker and Skousen, this council has an obligation to, at the very least, do some type of precautionary approach in terms of how it handles this. It's all there to be seen. And is there only mechanism via a call-in to the Minister, or can we do a precautionary in this transition time?
Or meet it?
To the CE.
Right. In my view, we have less ability to control the flow of applications to us, and their priority or otherwise, then perhaps would be under a call-in process, except to say that all of the considerations under the Act around priority, first come, first served, and all of that sort of stuff is considered. And I think it also depends on how comprehensive the suite of applications is and whether or not they are complete in terms of the way that we look at the catchment. So, for example, we know that Falls Dam, for example, needs consenting. And I'm talking on the fly here, so I'm not necessarily saying
no
this
hydrology
policy.
report, this type
There
of
is no hydrology. The hydrology work is in progress. But the other side of that is whether or not, and I think there probably is merit, the Falls Dam needs to be part of that consideration before you can enter into processing the water permits for the catchment as a question that I think we need to think about.
Would anybody else like to contribute their thoughts or have any questions on this? Kevin?
It's supplement to that. I see from the report that we do have tomorrow, there's currently 253 deemed permits that have yet to be application come forward, of which we say 90 is regarding power generation.
That's right.
So that leaves 163. The Menahira Care Group, does anyone know the volume of that, or how many deemed permits that?
I think it's about between 70 and 80 is my recollection.
80.
80. So that's we're saying there's 80 to 90 that we are unsure of at the moment when they will come, or if in fact they will.
Point of clarification, if they come now, it's been notified, they'll just go straight to the court. They can't, am I right?
No.
No.
That comes to us.
No, so we're dealing with two separate things, okay?
Yeah.
So we've got the plan change on one side, and we have the consents on another. So the plan change is a proposal of national significance. By the minister's determined that, and the plan change is going through the Environment Court process. We are still responsible for processing the resource consents, but as the Runanga have requested, the minister now needs to consider whether or not he has an appetite to call those consents in. He may consider that if the plan change is already a proposal of national significance, that the consents are part of a proposal of national significance, because there is that relationship, and he may consider that there is an opportunity to call them in. I'm not making the minister's mind up for him, I'm just saying he can consider that, and he may choose to do that. In my experience, if that were to happen, you then potentially end up in a situation where the two get bundled, if you like, and I will refer to Transmission Gully and also to the Rotaniwha proposal of national significance, where in those situations the plan changes were decided first and then the consent. And so if that was to occur and the minister chose that approach, and this is all hypothetical, so then the provisions of the current water plan would be usurped because the plan change would come in and the consents would be considered under that.
Sorry, just to follow up from that. So one of the concerns I seem to read into the letter was the capabilities of our processing team to handle a huge influx, which would be a concern. But if we actually look at the numbers,
can I just, we have got this on regulatory tomorrow.
Yes, you have.
Yeah,
I think that's probably the line to do it. I really wanted Edward to have the opportunity to explain a concern as our iwi partner to us as a collective, and that's really what this is about. I think if you want to go into the detail, we've got a paper on this tomorrow, and Kevin, if with your indulgence, I think that's probably where we'll go into that detail.
I'll leave that with you. I won't be here tomorrow.
Oh,
yeah, remember. But
well,
that's all right.
know.
Yeah.
Send us some questions.
It's
Councillor Hobbs, did you have anything?
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Edward, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, now moving on to, therefore, page 16 of your agenda, item 9.1, air quality overview.
No, what about UCLC?
Have I missed something?
Why Wanaka?
No, have missed. Oh, sorry.
Presentations.
Presentations.
I'm so sorry. Sorry, what's your first name?
Oh, Megan Williams and Mandy Bell from Y1.
Come and sit and join us, please. My apologies.
You hear that?
Shot, Scotty.
Yeah, Danielle. Megan and Mandy. And then we've got another presentation after this. Welcome.
So can I quickly just introduce these guys? I'll just quickly introduce these guys. So we've got Megan Williams and Mandy Bell from Y Wanaka, formerly the Upper Clutha Laceham Trust. They're going to be talking to us today about what has now been called an exemplar MFE project, their community, specifically their community catchment plan that's being developed over the last little while. ORC is a partner in the this MFE funded project, and our involvement includes me sitting on the governance group, and we also assist in the administration of the contract through the funding contract with MFE. So the community catchment plan was finalised in March, is that right? And we thought this was a good opportunity for councillors to hear the output of that project and where it's at before they start delivering on the plan. So over to Megan and Mandy.
Hey. Oh.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time this afternoon. My name's Megan Williams. I'm a sustainability advocate in my life. I work for tourism industry at Aotearoa doing just that, and I also project manage the Wanaka Water Project.
Right, so my name's Mandy Bell. I'm chairman of Y Wanaka, a founding member, and have farming, tourism and governance keeps me busy. My focus that runs through this is on One Health, the connected and looking for that sweet spot of health of water, environment, animals and people. I've also been a member of the Freshwater Leaders Group, which is the advisory group to the ministers on healthy waterways. So just to run through, I know some councillors, we met and presented 2 years ago, and we outlined a whole lot of plans. I'm really happy to say that a lot of those plans have come to fruition, and what has been created in partnership has been a number of other projects and significant momentum that has spurned from that. For Y Wanaka, we put all our activities into three spaces: catchment knowledge, covering education, science, tools, technology, and particularly working with the Sustainable Development Goals. Catchment management, that's where our specific projects fall. Community Catchment Plan is the key one there that has come through as part of the Ministry for Environment funded project with other partners, and also we call it Catchment Love. A lot of work that needs to happen to take environmental health forwards is directly related to people. It's communications, engagement activities, and it's something that we have been doing very much within Y Wanaka and with the community as a volunteer, a lot of volunteer input, and we're fortunate with the people in that space. The catchment for the Upper Clutha covers, I think we're 400 and how many hectares? 4,600 kilometres. That includes conservation land. And if you're in the Wanaka Basin and you run your eyes around the top of the mountains, up the Cadrona and back down to the confluence of the Luggett Creek with the Clutha, that's us. Collaboration underpins everything, in particular because we recognise that to go at pace and create change, and we need to work with everybody to leverage capability and capacity, and that comes across through leadership, with the community, and increasingly partnerships. These are some of the people that have been working with us and the entities from the early days, and I really couldn't speak more highly of Gwyneth and our representative from QLDC sitting around the table with us, because that means that we really are strengthening a lot of those connections and we're working together. Governance is is we're fortunate we've got a professional community governance and management sitting around the table with us. And I'd also say that these people in particular add quite a bit of experience across whole of sector. So we have what I call horizontal and vertical connections through the team that's sitting along working with Waiwanaka.
We also look after the Alpine Lakes Research and Education Centre, which many of you already know about. We lease the building that we house this out of off ORC on Riverbank Road in Wanaka. So we're progressing the idea, which was the brainchild of Dr. Maggie Lawton. So we're continuing with that project, developing relationships with researchers and scientists to get more science work done in the region. And a recent survey of over 50 scientists said that 71% of them would be interested in utilising a centre based in Wanaka near the lake. We're launching a water testing program with local landowners, so extending the catchment work that ORC does, so that allowing more farmers to do ongoing water monitoring on their farms. We're looking at how we can refurbish the building there. And at the moment, I think even today, there's earthquake testing going on to see whether or not it's worth investing money into making that a better facility for the future. So that's just a little bit of a watch this space on that one. The intention is also to build our citizen science program with local community. And thanks to you guys with the Eco Fund, we already have our first Bio Blitz planned. Obviously, that got postponed due to COVID, but we're looking at tying it in now with QLDC's building of a new wetland as part of the lakefront development plan along the lakefront. So it's fantastic to be able to have that centre to enable more work to happen. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about the actual catchment plan, and some of you might have seen our at-a-glance version and been or got sent it as papers. But what I'm just going to show you first is a video about our project.
The Wanaka Water Project has three work streams. The first one is the Integrated Catchment Management Plan, and the second, the riparian plantings. Then we have urban research program looking at stormwater and drainage into Lake Wanaka. The goal is, in 50 years' time, have pristine water for the whole of our community.
As part of our freshwater improvement funded project, we wanted to do some urban stormwater research. And that was really important to us because the massive growth that's occurred in our region. We have two distinct projects. One is focused on the status quo, looking at macroinvertebrates, fish and heavy metals. The other is looking at more the first flush in a stormwater cycle. We wanted to find out exactly what's coming off our urban areas and into our waterways. There's been very little research done up until this project.
Is nursery. We're really aiming to look after some of these environments, these dryland environments, by raising eco-sourced plants that are seeds that are sourced from this area, true community volunteer work, and then planting those out and maintaining that material in the wild so as to increase the biodiversity of this area. Very good. So we're 2 years in and we're at 9,500 plants, and we're looking forward to having about 24,000 plants in the ground over the next few years.
Freshwater Improvement Fund has created a lot of momentum for other projects. We've got 30 people that are directly involved in different parts of those work streams. And then there'd be close to 120 that have been involved, whether it's in riparian plantings or getting out in the middle of the night to do stormwater testing. What we'd love to see is everybody getting involved, from businesses developing environmental plans and water plans, residents understanding what's going down their drains into the lake, through to our tourists and holiday makers when they come to Wanaka, that they take on the same passion that we have for our water, the respect, and look after it as we do.
Okay, so hopefully that's given you a good overview for those of you who didn't know about the Wanaka Water Project. I'd just like to point out that the deed was written with Ministry for the Environment as an ORC on behalf of Upper Clutha Lakes Trust, which is now known as Waiwanaka. So there's the fundings listed there. MFE is approximately half. We had a little bit of input from QLDC, but primarily the match funding was all from community. So from the Sargood bequest and Million Metres, which is crowd-funded, and we're raising that as we go, but luckily quite successfully. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the key contributions from the Shaping Our Future, which is QLDC initiative, but also community initiative. So a lot of work gone in from the task force there, and also Dr. Simone Langens, who was visiting from Europe and brought all her skills in particularly our cultural values, which totally enriched our project. So the Community Catchment Plan, as Mandy said, was finished and launched in March. Due to COVID, we're just really launching that or releasing all of those details now into the community. There's been a little bit of media, but there will be more. As I said, there's the at-a-glance version, which you can see. The risks to our catchment that were identified are quite different to other catchments because they're almost everything. And so it's imperative that we do something to make sure the things that don't get worse in the future. And then everything really boils down to healthy ecosystems and community wellbeing. So I'll hand back to Mandy to go into some more detail.
So it's very much a grounds-up, whole-of-community approach to this, and it's really interesting whether we're sitting at around a national table or in the community that these two things come through. So there were 60 actions that were part of, have dropped out of the Community Catchment Plan. On the left are the ones that we're all very familiar with, and also ecosystem functioning should be in there as well. On the right, it's all about people and planning. We take a system design approach to setting up of our catchment plan, and what we're going to be able to do now is, because we have the plan, we can take out parts of what makes up a healthy ecosystem and have a system design approach, a whole approach to, for example, fish, and understand where do we want to be, where are we now, what do we know, what don't we know, what are the actions we have to do to go forwards. And practice change as part of the people space, behaviour change, and those relationships are absolutely critical for us to actually not have a plan that's sitting on the shelf in a couple of years' time, but there's a lot of good stuff happening. As an example of one of the core actions, and this started, we didn't wait until the plan was delivered. There was a number of actions as the community was part of what was going on, that things happened. In March, we set up 5 new catchment groups, one already set up, the Lake Wanaka group, and they cover the whole basin. So we've pretty well got now 90% of the basin covered with landowners, and they're moving at pace. In some of my work elsewhere, I've seen this happen before, and you make a call as to, are we going to carry on or should we wait and create programs? So we're in front of it with the programs. We have clearly made a call because the landowners are wanting this to move forwards quickly. So each group, supported by Action Networks, it's a group funded by a Primary Growth Partnership, MPI group. It's well worth having a look at Action Networks to look at the social science that underpins that. And I also chair an MPI program, same thing, it's all about practice change in people to keep things moving. So each group has 3 goals, and this has come from the groups themselves. It's not, we're not telling people. They're creating catchment management plans, which includes farm environment plans, and through the use of overseer and nutrient understandings, overseer has been developed significantly, and we can now do GHG emission calculation, and we're moving towards mitigation. 3 of our groups actually have said we want a carbon program first, please, because we're going to be there in a couple of months, and so we're kicking that off. We're very fortunate with the expertise in our community in that space. The second one is community engagement and communication. So each group takes on how they want to communicate with community, because we've got a very visible catchment and properties. Examples of this is Lake Hawe Group creating a statement of intent. They're going above and beyond what regulations might be saying they need to do. And the Luggett catchment, we're actually creating a video of the history and the connection of water and what that means for our community. Then there'll be a specific project, for example, the Cardrona Skifield Distillery are working with the Cardrona catchment, so some really interesting stuff going on. This is, we're in this COVID space, so just as a heads up, because we were fortunate in our timing to have a whole of community catchment plan that had been created, we have got these action in place as to what would we potentially be doing to be part of job creation, economic stimulus and healthy environment and water. So we have, along with a lot of other catchment groups, been involved in dialogue with 4 ministries, including Jobs for Nature. I've been seconded onto the Jobs for Nature working group, along with ORC, Gavin and others. And I'm, I suppose, representative of the Catchment Alliance, and I see tremendous opportunity for coordination and support that will come through from potential funding. And we're having, positive dialogue with MPI and at the moment, but as to where this all lands, we will have to wait and see. So the next steps for us is to really strengthen connections and partnerships, particularly with our existing partners with ORC. How can we maximise opportunities and progress? We've shown up in our basin that with a good plan and a whole of community engagement, we can really make progress at pace, and it's whole progress. And the other one is really the key one at the moment is we're taking these Y action groups are really pushing us along to deliver programs. So it would be fantastic to have stronger dialogue on the science front end and some of these plans. And also, interestingly, we've got businesses in town, building sector, construction sector, tourism and hospitality, all starting to take up this action network type approach to implement change, which will impact on whole of environment and aligned with the SDG goals. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to everybody.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Kate.
Kia ora, and thank you for doing all that work. I'm just interested in the catchment-wide plans and where farm plans sit in, because I'm challenged by an annual plan submission from Orokonui actually about regional parks, and think that led me to thinking about the catchment level you'll get, the better results potentially. And so which came first with you? Just understanding that.
So I think they do work side by side. So what gives strength to the farms is that they're in catchment groups 7 to 9 as we maximise social science learnings, and then to have alongside that a whole of catchment approach. What that means is that you actually you can minimise or eliminate any gaps or double ups. So this whole project started, I was doing work all over, came back to Wanaka, what's happening? There were 13 projects happening, good ones, but no one was talking or connecting. And we had gaps and we went maximising leverage. So side by side, don't halt something to not do the other.
Appreciate that, but again, you've led us down the COVID path, and I totally get that. Are you prioritising work for the ecosystems, I presume, rather than just saying this farmer's keen, so we're going to do his 100 metres? I mean, I don't.
Oh, yes, okay. Yeah. So how do you, if funding comes in, where do you prioritise it? So we've been discussing this because we were asked to put something into MPI 2 months ago, so we've had time to toss things around. And ideally, if funding comes in, and it's part of how our catchment approach, our whole catchment goes, you need to prioritise where are your critical sources. But how do you do that when it's coming at pace across a larger area? What we are looking at doing, because we've got the same, well, not concerns, but same dialogue we're going to have to enter into, and how do you be transparent and do the best for the environment? So farmers ideally have environmental plans. Now, our farmers are creating environmental plans within 3 months for 30 to 40 farms. The expertise is out there. They don't have to be perfect, but it's a start, and you're starting on that pathway. We have to be totally cognizant that there are going to be changes to those plans, but you actually take the open mindsets that is happening out there in the rural sector because of all of the discussions in the last 2 years, and we keep moving through. So take the mindsets, ideally environmental plans, but what do you do if you haven't got a farm that has got one? I would be looking for what we call qualifiers, and this concept has come up around the Jobs for Nature table. A qualifier could be that you are committed to doing an environmental plan.
No, I suppose.
Sorry, I didn't answer.
I'm just wondering, at a catchment level, you can make more change, but you won't necessarily be doing it on every farm, and that there's some ecosystems that are so important, and it's that priority that some people may miss out.
Yes.
But that's understood and acknowledged.
And easier for us because we've got a whole catchment plan.
Can I ask one last question?
Yes, listen, we could be here forever.
I know. Okay.
And I'm going to suggest something to you.
Yeah.
And it's to you, ladies. Listen, why don't you invite us up? Come and show us what you're doing.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you on. Yep.
We will be getting out of Dunedin, hopefully, and going to places and making other meetings. So if you could arrange with Gwyneth, and then you can do a bit of a show and tell, take us onto the land, give us a bit of a look, and then we can answer as many questions as well. I'm conscious of the fact we've got a huge agenda today, but
Thank you.
But listen, that's fantastic. But we'd love to come and see you. Is that all right?
Yep, great.
Is that
Thank
okay
you.
with councillors?
Very happy to, if there are questions too. Yep, we've got our emails on the phones.
Yeah.
Can I just ask the Chair if those slides can be made available in our diligent? They are, thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much. Your journey has been far from wasted. It's about to start another one.
Yes, we're a bit worried about getting home.
No, yes, that's right. I think you're all right here. I think it's Dunedin that's the problem.
Right.
Well,
The hill suburb.
We will find out.
Yeah. Yeah, let us know if you're trapped in a snowdrift.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Michael. Cheers. Are you off for the afternoon, mate? Have a good day. All right. Now we have a second presentation. Gwyneth, could you introduce us, please? Air quality.
So what about 8.2 and 8.3? Sorry, Mr. Chair, what about update on land and water regional plan and health and air quality in Otago? 8.2 and 8.3 on the agenda. Okay.
We're just doing the presentations.
8.3. I don't think it was going to be 8.2.
If you could just look at the agenda.
No, there's no 8.2.
It's been cancelled. Okay.
It's actually been deferred.
Yes, postponed.
Postponed.
And through the chair, the reason why we are still just coordinating a first gathering with staff and Councillor Robertson and myself, just to make sure that we're on the right page with the staff so we can contribute when we hit the ground.
Thank you.
Yes, kia ora.
Hi, kia ora.
Yeah, I'd like to introduce to you Danielle Smith from Southern District Health Board. So Danielle is a health promotion advisor for Public Health South, and Tom Scott. Yeah. So there's a series of presentations and papers this afternoon that are focused on our air quality program, and we'll come back to you with that, but we definitely are very grateful for these two to come and present about the air quality issues and the health outcomes for people. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. I need to turn this on. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay.
Go for it.
So, tēnā koutou. I'm Danielle Smith. I'm a health promotion advisor working at the Southern DHB for Public Health South. And part of my portfolio is healthy housing, which incorporates air quality. So, I've lived in Otago my whole life, and we live in a very beautiful part of the country, but from our public health point of view, we have some of the worst air quality still in the country, and it's far too harmful to health still, which I will get into. So I've been involved in organising 2 huis with multi-agency representatives. So we've had people from OSC, so thanks Sarah Harrison for inviting me to talk. Environment Southland, Ian Longley, who's a leading air quality scientist at NIWA, the Cozy Homes Trust, and various community groups, as well as representatives from Central Otago District Council and Clutha District Council. So those huis are basically a chance for us to get together and ensure that we have strong and robust messaging around air pollution and health, and that we have the same priorities that are aligned. So on the Zoom, I should hopefully have Dr. Susan Jack. She's joined us. So she will hopefully, alongside myself and Tom, answer any questions you might have if we've got time afterwards. I've got my contact details at the end if there's no time. So I'll start with a few health statistics. The World Health Organization attribute 4.2 million deaths every year to exposure to air pollution. Now this is worldwide, so it does include countries with significantly worse air pollution than us, but it is quite a sobering statistic. It can be hard to imagine the scale of the pollutants, and I think this video really helps for those who, sorry, there's another video, so you might, I don't know if you'll be able to see it over there maybe, but
how long is this going to last for?
Sorry.
Air pollution. It lurks all.
Sorry, could you ask, can you tell me how long does a video last for?
1 minute and 20 seconds.
Oh, okay, cool.
I actually don't know if I can play it because it's...
All right, you can send it to us later if you like.
Okay, yep, that's fine. It basically just explains how the pollutants, how small they are, how tiny they are, and how they impact health, which links into this next kind of explanation. So cardiovascular disease is one of the health impacts caused by air pollution. So it's our leading cause of death in New Zealand, and asthma is another one, which in New Zealand we have some of the worst child asthma rates. 1 in 7 children suffer from asthma, and 15% of Kiwis over 45 have COPD, which is also worsened by air pollution. So everyone has the right to breathe air that is unpolluted and not harmful to health. It's true for secondhand smoke, and so it should also be true for air pollution. OIC have reflected this thinking in their air quality strategy, which is really great, and that they say we need to ensure that air is safe to breathe for everyone at any time across Otago. So from a public health perspective, we look towards population health impacts rather than individual level health impacts, and it's from this perspective that we can see that there's still lots of strides to be taken to improve air quality in certain pockets of Otago, such as Cromwell, Arrowtown and Milton. So as a society, we need to acknowledge that while we often think of health as BMI or blood pressure, it actually starts in the home and the community. So, and as far as the health impacts of poor air quality, they're well documented. So here's an estimate of the health effects of air pollution on health in New Zealand. These are national figures. So it's estimated that it causes this many premature deaths nationally, so 27.2 in 2016 per 100,000 people. And there's, if we go to the next slide, it shows what the cases are for South Island. And the top 3 territorial authorities, they don't include any from Otago, which is great to see. But what's concerning is that if you look at the map, and if we zoom in, Central Otago has still quite high premature mortality in particular. So, yeah, the South Island, we are more than 3 times higher with premature mortality per 100,000 people. And yeah, the statistics are not great, but we're trying to work towards that.
Sorry, the statistics aren't great, or what they're telling us isn't great.
Sorry, I guess what the statistics is showing us is not great in terms of we've got a lot of work to do. Yeah. So ORC have been working really hard to try and educate people through the Burn Dry Breathe Easy campaign that was promoted last year. So this is one aspect I think needs to continue is education. educating people why they need to check wood for dampness and how to start a fire in the least polluting way. The Cosy Homes Trust has also been heavily involved in promoting burning dry firewood and how to keep a healthy home. And this, how to keep a healthy home, goes hand in hand with the messaging about clean burning. So we can burn all the dry wood we have, but if the house isn't energy efficient, we are unnecessarily burning more than we need to, which adds to the chimney pollution. So just a quick case study, Christchurch had the Clean Heat project. It started in 2002, and it officially started in 2006 with open fire use being prohibited, continuing to 2008 with non-complying enclosed burners older than 15 years being prohibited. And you can see the trend has been very promising. And anecdotally, people who lived in Christchurch their whole life say they used to remember times where they kind of couldn't go outside because it was so horrible and smoky, and now it's a lot better. So this Clean Heat project was a voluntary program. It used subsidies similar to the Clean Heat, Clean Air subsidies that the ORC offered. And as you can see, before they started, the number of high exceedance nights was between 30 and 60 per annum, which is similar to what we see now in Milton and Arrowtown in particular. So there's hope, I guess. This is quite good to see this in a statistical way that shows that the trend has declined. So two key principles of their approach, though, is that they, first, for people who got new burners, they had to actually have insulation up to the New Zealand Building Code standard. So that was because there's not really any point in replacing a burner if the house isn't up to energy efficiency, really, healthy homes. And second is that there were options in payments. So people could either get a complete subsidy, pay for everything if they, for example, had a community services card, and it went all the way through to an interest-free loan. So it made it really easy for people to change to a cleaner burner. So Ian Longley through NIWA, they're currently undertaking studies in Arrowtown to review both the indoor and outdoor air quality. So this will help us understand if the impacts of air quality are also felt indoors, which might actually help people to kind of get the messaging a bit more if it's affecting them personally. It's a little bit easier to turn a blind eye if it's affecting the community. So just this video here, it's pretty cool. It shows the air pollution in Arrowtown last Thursday, which was a day where the pollution exceeded the limit. You can see that's kind of lunchtime, so it's gets a bit better. Everyone's at work. Everyone comes back from work, and it looks pretty dismal.
That is a Chinese city.
It's so that exceedance was over 50 micrograms per cubic metre, which is the limit. And so in terms of opportunities, I think we need to continue the education and phasing out old burners. So the Cosy Homes Trust in particular, they've got a great new manager, Jeremy, who's actually here. Good. So over here. So he's keen to push this. It's something that the ORC has helped fund through the Clean Heat, Clean Air program, but it needs to be continued because, as we saw in Christchurch, it did actually make a difference. The second is I think we need to look at outdoor burning and consider tightening the rules around this, just in terms of it's very unpleasant when you drive through it anyway, but the fact that you can smell and sometimes taste it means that there are enough pollutants to actually affect a human inside a moving vehicle, which is not great, but also it affects our public health messaging about clean burning, because if people driving through to their home in Milton, for example, see this, then they might start thinking, well, if they're allowed to, why can't I? So it's kind of a visible reminder, I think, of the double standards between like rural and urban dwellers with air pollution limits. And the third thing, I think, is to keep advocating to improve housing quality. So as I've already discussed, that just goes hand in hand with air quality. You could have, you know, an ultra low emission burner, but if the house is poorly insulated and drafty, then you're just throwing money away and it's just polluting the air for no reason. And we do have a lot of beautiful old villas across Otago, which haven't been maintained to 21st century standards, and in one of the coldest regions of New Zealand. So I think personally an eco-design advisor would be really great to have in the central regions. So I don't know if everyone knows Lisa Burrows at the DCC. She's fantastic, and she helps anyone regardless of income or need on how to tailor their house for it to be better, energy efficient and healthier. So it's something that I think is missing from Central, in particular in Queenstown Lakes. And that's the end of my presentation. So I have put my email address and contact number if you'd like to send me anything. I think obviously running a little bit behind time today, so happy to answer any questions if I can.
Chairman, Councillor Hobbs, there are a number. I will be taking this up later on, but there are a number of things. I mean, and it seems to me that we have to work across ORC, DCC, Cosy Homes Trust. There are some things that we can do ourselves, but when we're talking about getting houses redone and made safe, that's, I think, CE. It's not our job, and this is the difficulty in a sense, because there are non-regulatory things we can do with Cosy Homes Trust by supplying them, but in actual fact, stuff up on the regulatory stuff sits with DCC or whomever. What I don't want to do, so we really need almost a group, and I don't know whether you have got a group that works across the different bodies.
Well, it sounds like there's a GUI.
I'd quite like to see something like that to begin to tackle things across. This young man here one of his staff used it on an individual basis with a problem we had. Oh, I don't know, somewhere over there in the street. And it was somebody having a wrong burner in their house that was affecting the neighbour and affecting them badly. Yeah. And I've got a couple of other ones that are coming through, but yeah. So I'd love to see some collaboration across the groups, because we've all got things to pull, and I want us to pull them together, because otherwise it's going to take too long.
I agree.
I did this in 2003. The National Environment Standard on this, or whenever it was, and we've still got problems, and I get dismayed.
It would be great to have more, I guess, multi-agency formal meetings. To kind of see how we can work together in our capacities to bring around action.
Can't we made a difference? Can't we move very fast?
I mean, that was,
They had to, mind you.
Yeah, there was
Or they had 400 people dying a year.
I'll come to you in a second, Kate. The other thing that's missing, though, here is statistics, and these are poor. Really bad. And when I talk about that, I mean there's no correlation here between the problem and the effects. You've used those Central Otago ones. I assume you've got those from hospital admissions, have you?
The Central Otago, the slide, sorry, I'll just go back to the slide. Do you mean this slide?
Yep, that one there.
That was a government agency funded study, basically. We just took that from their webpage.
Okay, so it's very difficult when you're trying to make the point about Central Otago being bad if you can't make comparisons with, for example, Dunedin, which doesn't have an air problem. Well, no, it doesn't, not by comparison. That's why it's not an airshed, councillor. So the reality is that the airshed ones, which are Cromwell, Milton, Arrowtown,
Alexandra. Yeah.
We should be able to highlight, because if we're ever going to make the case, we should be able to highlight that there is a specific correlation between the quality of the air they're breathing in those hospital admissions via V, other non-affected, if you like, or non-air-shared one areas in Otago.
Right, yeah.
Have we got access to those figures or not?
Danielle, as far as... okay.
Sorry, can I jump in there?
Yes, absolutely.
Susan Jack is the medical officer of health.
Right.
So
go for your life, Susan.
Okay, thanks. So in that same report, they actually got the figures for Central Otago, and premature mortality is double the national rate. Cardiac hospitalisations is about double. Respiratory hospitalisations is surprisingly about the same as the national rate. So yes, there are the statistics to back up that we do have a problem in Central Otago. We don't have specific data on Arrowtown, Milton, Cromwell, because you will appreciate that you need a significant population in order to find these associations. So it has been aggregated up to, in this case, Central Otago district level.
Okay, so we're missing those at the moment. Can we fill in those gaps?
So the problem is that something like Arrowtown, if you were looking at hospitalisations, the population base of Arrowtown is just simply too small to be able to demonstrate those. But like Danielle said, NIWA has been doing some incredible work with monitoring of air quality, and that data I believe we do have. And NIWA are also looking at some point to do that in Milton as well, in Cromwell, but probably not for another year or two.
Okay, thank you. Kate.
Thank you. This is a really interesting space to get your head around some of the data, and I just want to understand I totally get the airshed one and some of the two areas of being a high priority, but in the areas that don't have a concern, how big a problem is it? What is that problem in national figures compared to people living in really cold homes? Because I haven't got it out of the reports that come later, and it's not your gig, I appreciate that, an understanding of the efficiency loss to get to PM 2.5, for example, and how much colder the houses will be or how less efficient the fires will be.
Yeah, it is a good point. We, as far as I know, Susan might correct me on that, I don't think there's been studies done on each separately.
Yeah, but
I don't think there's been a good study done on the relationship between them, which I think is kind of what you're...
Yeah. I mean, I live in an area where we often don't have power.
Yeah.
And the risk then is to have, or that people would just turn a switch off rather than lighting what is seen at fire, which is seen as cheaper.
Yeah.
And I'm just that concerned. I'm just wondering if there's no correlation data yet.
Not as far as I've found out, no. But it's definitely something that I'm always aware of, is that that balance, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
Councillor Scott. And then Councillor Robertson, do you have a hand up?
Oh, no, I don't. Okay. Sorry, thanks.
Yeah, just a couple of points, Mr. Chair, a couple of comments you made. Dunedin is in an airshed, Mr. Chair.
Not airshed 1.
No, it's not an airshed 1, it's an airshed 2. And does Dunedin have an air quality issue? Yes, it does, on a micro level. Yes. So, for example, your neighbour could be inappropriately burning, it's coming across the boundary. On a macro level, it actually achieves the World Health Organization standards. So it is an airshed 2 for a reason. The good sou'wester does help. The next point is in relation to the messaging that this council give and councillors give, is that if we focus on the information that we don't have, then we'll never get there. Whereas, in fact, we actually have solid information now to tell a story, and that story has already been told in terms of asthma for kids and health issues for kids. We have the information to provide leadership. If we don't provide leadership, then we'll end up in the COVID situation, etc., etc. My question really is maybe it's appropriate to go from this presentation to the paper on Arrowtown specifically. Was that your intent, to move from here to Arrowtown paper?
No, we were going to go through in the order on the agenda, but
okay. So that's fine. But hey, thank you for your work. We're running out of excuses. We just need to get on with it. Yeah,
I agree.
So what you're saying is, we know what the answer is because I've solved it in Christchurch. Insulate the blimmin' houses and improve the air burners, and then have some regulatory around that they are actually burning the right stuff, and let's just get on with it.
Yep.
The report here on Arrowtown talks about some of the practical issues in terms of entering somebody's house and all this type of stuff, but we do actually have a lot of information, and we are slowly moving forward, are we?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Just the fact that we've had, multi-agencies, people coming together to talk about it, I think is a good positive step. And
Okay. Hey, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Then Councillor Malcolm.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Always awesome. I'm sorry you're still bashing your head against the same brick wall that you have been for years, and I've been joined you in that over the years, having tried to get an eco-advisor in QLDC since 2013, still failed. So very interesting to think that an eco-advisor might actually come from this council and work across all the TLAs, and I can see some good reasoning behind that, so I want to pursue that. I also have, like your comment, and we've seen the stats come out from the Green Building Council. I think last week they came out, housing efficiency can save up to 70% of fuels used for heating. Wow. If we had efficient houses, and that 600,000 homes in New Zealand fall below standards of efficiency. So I wonder what your view is on how we can collectively put pressure on government to improve the building standards for new houses and find ways to improve existing houses. Because I think there's some good initiatives that you're doing, and burn-offs has been a bane of my life for some years too. And but it's band-aiding. We've got to get to the source of the problem. And I wonder what you think about that and how you think we might do that.
Yeah, that's a hard question. It's something that I think we've had a lot of discussions about is, we need to change the building code. Like, how can we do that? It's just crazy. The insulation standards are below places like Australia and most of the developed world.
That is work that is underway at the moment, I guess, with government.
Can we help?
It's just takes time to work through.
And
I would love to know the best way as well. I would love to know the best way. I'm not sure.
Asked and answered. Kevin Malcolm.
So if we look at the figures for Milton, and you look at the new cosy home regime that's going through, which is doing a great job right through. Why is the uptake so poor in Milton? What will be the trigger to make Milton better, or get a better uptake in Milton to get better results?
I can't speak too much to the program itself. It's generally Cozy Homes Trust and OIC kind of were the people driving it mostly. The only thing I can think of is that Arrowtown had quite a high uptake, but there was a lot of education and community advocacy going on in Arrowtown, especially when NIWA got involved. And so I think it could just be that they're not targeted yet for education purposes, and perhaps that's a reason why, but they are on the plan for NIWA. They do want to go to Milton in particular, and I think Cromwell was the next one as well, and hopefully continue that. But I don't think the burner, the clean heat, clean air, I might be wrong, it's stopping, I think, isn't it, the program?
Sorry, I think Sarah, Gwyneth, do you have something to add to that?
I was saying Jeremy, he was involved. Jeremy Baker from the Cosy Homes was involved in the Arrowtown project. I don't know if you want to comment on that or.
I'll just, I guess, echo what Danielle said. I think, and I preface this with, I just started Cozy Homes Trust in February, so a lot of this work was done before my time, particularly in Milton. But I agree that part of the reason for the success in Arrowtown was the multiple groups on the ground with sort of different versions or different angles on the same message. And that helped really attract interest from different parts of the community, and I think that's why we saw a good result there. There was some work done in Milton a couple of years ago that I understand did increase uptake, but there are a number of barriers there that make it more difficult with some of these socioeconomic challenges.
Yep. That's the issue.
For example, with the city being often left up gaps, quite a substantial sum, so that doesn't some folks.
Right, listen, are there any more questions, please? Because this is the presentation. We'll have plenty of opportunity for policy debate. There are none. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me here.
I can see that.
It's not enough.
Thank you. And thank you for your time.
Absolutely, thank you.
That presentation is on your computers, so there you go.
Yeah.
Yes, and feel free to contact me with any more questions or discussions. Happy to talk. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, let's do it.
Now, Gwyneth, what does that take us to? 9.2. 9.1.
20 million. But look at the difference.
It's also and I don't even know if it's you do it next cloud.
There's a whole lot there.
I was just having a look at
it's not a simple one-off thing. That's why I asked about
and that's putting up as a current, I don't know what is really going to be prior.
We can do it with that much money to get that result, really. You know what
I know, but at least with the older ones, at least with them, we can make them
right.
Look at the change.
Yeah, that's but I mean, there's other factors, like in Milton, for example, we know that the quality of housing is poor. So we also know that there is some flood impacted housing, housing in Milton that you wouldn't invest in because you've got to raise it anyway.
Yep.
Plus you layer on top of that with socio-economic situation.
Which is big.
Who owns the homes as opposed to who lives in them. It's a big issue. And the other thing is,
should I speak? I don't know. Are we in a meeting? I was just going to say, so we have now got 3 papers, but what we're going to do is we're going to bookend each of these papers with just a quick presentation for staff to give context in terms of.
Right. We're going to do 9.1, 9.2 and 9.3 together, is that right?
So 9.1 is basically our placemaker. To say we're going a quick staff presentation, right, to this first bookend. Then we're going to have 3 papers. The NES paper, which is around our submission that we're proposing draft submission. We've got an air quality report for the last year that Sarah's written, and we've also got a specific paper on the project at Arrowtown. Then we're just going to cap it with a short presentation at the very end. It's like 2 slides. Just again to bring that piece together. Okay, so hopefully that presentation gave for food for thought, and now we're going to get into, I guess, ORC activity specific. So.
Thank you. So yes, I'm just going to give a short presentation to give a bit of context to the 3 papers, and it's context around what we have done as a regional council on air quality. So just to start off with, and Danielle really reminded us of that during her presentation, we have significant air pollution issues in winter, especially in central Otago, and it's mostly because of home heating emissions, but also it's also aggravated by inversion layers in those towns. So our worst towns are Alexandra, Arrowtown, Clyde, Cromwell, as well as Milton, and we also have a concerning degrading trend in Mosgiel. So those are the real hotspots in Otago. I think that during the previous discussion, you've really traversed the complexity of air quality management in Otago and in New Zealand. That's because of the interrelationship between housing quality and air quality, and because of the many agencies who actually have a role in both those issues. In 2007, following the adoption of the NES for air quality, there was a lot of work done by ORC on air quality. There was a strategy developed. There was a plan change, which adopted really stringent standards for the time for home heating emissions, mostly in Air Zone 1, so those central Otago towns. We instituted a financial subsidy program in 2007, and we also did quite a lot of communication. As a result of all that work, we had really good outcomes. The emissions were halved pretty much in each town, but unfortunately that didn't translate into much better air quality. There's no linear relationship between emission and air quality, and that's probably because of the inversion layers, but we are not too sure. So that has led us to review our assumptions, and the advice we got was that even though we were having stringent emission standards for the region, they were still not good enough. So compliant burners are not good enough in Otago to solve the air quality problems, and we needed to go even cleaner than those clean or efficient burners. In 2018, we developed, in view of that finding, we developed a new air quality strategy, which was adopted in August 2018, recognizing the fact that also our local or our communities are different. If you look at the Milton community, the Arrowtown community, it's a different community which might require a different program of work. We also have real opportunities for partnerships locally and with ICA and other agencies. The air quality strategy was comprehensive, so it looked at home heating emissions, but also how outdoor burning, nuisance effects, toxic emissions, etc. But home heating is the number one issue. So there was community consultation on this strategy and a pretty good support from the community. In late 2018, there was an implementation plan which was adopted by Council. And it looked at really putting the focus on non-regulatory method that was supporting the community in transitioning towards ultra-low emission burners, but also doing that education around using dry wood, because the emission from solid fuel burners is a combination of the type of burner you have and how you use it. So it was looking at those two different issues and working on both. Financial support was seen as a critical tool to effectively transitioning towards this really low impact heating. And we were also looking at a more proactive approach to address outdoor burning issues. The focus on non-regulatory was also aiming at doing improvement before we were reviewing the air plan. But this implementation program was requiring a significant increase in the budget on air quality, and the implementation and our budgets have actually remained stable. So last year we started the work on doing local air quality programs with Arrowtown, and one of the paper is about the outcome of this program, which and Sarah Harrison has done a really good job in working with NIWA, THB, and Cozy Home Trust to get good outcomes in Arrowtown. For this year, the Clean Air Clean Heat Fund has been fully subscribed, so we have no more funding to continue that work, and that's slightly concerning, given that ICA's Warmer Home program is actually subsidizing compliant burners, which are not as clean as we would like them to be. So So for this year, what we are going to do in terms of implementation is continuing the good communications campaign that our communication team has put together, carrying on with the compliance activities and do a follow-up campaign with Arrowtown around compliance and enforcement. Working with Cozy Home Trust to continue the messaging around clean heating, maintain our relationship with stakeholders and TLAs, but also working for the LTP towards regaining momentum around air quality. And yeah, that's it. And those are photos of our campaigns of Breathe Easy, Burn Dry, etc.
Thank you for the overview, Selby. Much appreciated. Questions for Selby? Councillor Scott.
Look, there's nothing in there that I could disagree with other than one glaring gap. And that's following on from the previous presentation, where basically the Christchurch scenario and the study that was successful was one was improving the burners, but secondly, improving the insulation. Now, look, if we just forgot about the burners just for a minute, just say, let's forget about the burners. And then actually put all their focus on the insulation. Just imagine if all the existing housing stock, the insulation was good. Hey, if it was good enough, you could keep it warm with a match. The amount of heating that's required it can be minimised right now. Even if you had the worst burner, the amount of wood that you would have to put through it because the houses are insulated would be minimal. So we're putting all this energy in here. We're being unsuccessful, really, even if we're getting incremental improvements. We're just holding our ground. And, shouldn't our focus should be, as we were saying before, the building code or whatever, should be, if we sorted that out, plus this, then we'll get there. If we don't do that, then aren't we simply wasting our time? Should we go and do something else?
Are we? Yeah.
I think what you could and Sylvia hinted at this in the introduction, it's complex and there's multi sort of facets. So I agree. There's been an emphasis with the implementation plan at the moment on the comms, which is, we can see from the arrow term, has implication. There's also been on the subsidy around wood burners. But you're right, there are other potential options we could add to the mix, including supporting the housing stock. It was just mentioned build better housing stock was mentioned, and that's exactly.
All this modelling we're doing. What is the significance of the insulation? Is it 80% of the issue?
So I can't answer a question on how much heat you would need for a home in a particular temperature based on the housing stock.
But a lot of time and effort going around in circles.
But I agree that there's definitely a potential to look at housing stock as another potential option. Okay.
Might have some more info here.
Being encouraged to jump in here, but I just note that the ECA program that subsidizes insulation and heating, you are not eligible to get a heater unless you have qualifying insulation. So I think there's a lot to be said for looking at insulation as part of the solution. Essentially we could be throwing good money after bad if we're not insulating the houses and we're putting in. Also mentioned, because it's come up a couple times, around building code and looking at that. So somewhat quietly, I think it was just on Friday afternoon, government announced a once-in-a-generation review of how buildings are built in New Zealand. It's going to revise the building code, the Building Act. It's going to apply to new and existing homes and other buildings. Obviously, it's quite an ambitious long-term project, but just putting that on your radar as something that we should all be involved in, and collaboration across.
And could I just add to that?
Sorry, Councillor Wilson.
Oh, sorry.
And they'll come back to you.
Thank you. Sorry, technology issues keeping up with you there. Just want to check. I get the airshed problem at 1 and 2, and why would be really pushing for the 2.5 there. How bad is the problem in the airshed in the other areas of Otago? And from the nuance of whether we should be focusing our attention on in our submission and everywhere else on the for 2.5 in the airshed 1 and 2 places.
Can I ask, do we hold that question to the air quality report? And then Sarah will hopefully be able to answer that question in terms of comparison between the 2 airsheds in terms of exceedances?
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Is that all right?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, the other question I had was, should we also be having an urban expansion discussion and or allowing burners in houses in those areas? Is that part of...
It's an option.
Yeah, because, you know...
Yeah, in the implementation program, on the air quality strategy, that was really identified about putting more stringent standards for those new houses and reviewing also the airshed boundaries to incorporate those new developments which have happened since 2007. But clearly there is more, we need to prevent the further degradation of air quality by looking at new housing and stricter standards for new housing.
We'll have this policy debate. Councillor Malcolm.
Just agreeing with what Councillor Scott is saying around insulation, but under cosy homes, they deprivation levels 8, 9 and 10, so you can actually now get free insulation of your home. So it's 90%, I think it is, from government, and there's a trust that puts in the other 10%. So, and I just wonder if it comes back to, are we getting the advertising of that out or the push of that out? Rentals aren't included, but just your general housing. I just, that might be more the area that we need to concentrate on, because certainly we need to insulate before we start putting a fire in, but or changing the fires anyway.
And Jeremy knows more about that than me, but I believe that the ECA fund is only for people who have a community services card or who are in those low deprivation index areas. And those low deprivation areas are mostly in Milton. They are not really in those central Otago towns, so they don't intersect too much with our air zone 1, airshed 1.
Councillor Callagher, then Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you. Look, please excuse me if it is covered in here, but has our investigatory work or our data gathering work delved down to an individual super efficient burner in an inversion area and tested what are the emissions when wet wood is burnt versus when dry wood is burnt? Because to me, it's a cumulative effect of wet wood or damp wood or unseasoned for the required length of time. And I do wonder whether more education and more regulation around the length of time wood is seasoned will actually improve the situation.
Yeah. Hopefully Sarah Harrison is on Zoom. Is that right? Sarah, are you able to answer Councillor Callagher's question?
Yes. So we haven't specifically tested that in Otago. There's been about I'm not too sure, but there has been some studies around the country for real life testing of burners rather than in a lab. No, we have not done it ourselves. But that is something that we would like to look into perhaps in the future.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councillor Hobbs.
My problem is the policy has got multi-agencies and multi-problems. And that's what I want to get for you and for me, some clarity today. Because at the moment, we've got to do what we can do. It's all very well for us to point out and say, a new code, that's not our bailiwick, is it? A new housing code. I'd love it. I'd love us to be able to advocate for it, but it's not our code. Let alone who does the inspection of rental housing. Rental housing in Dunedin is appalling. We all know that. Who the hell inspects it? It's not us. So do you see what I'm trying to get at? And there lies the problem about individuals versus airsheds. The problems that I get as a councillor here in Dunedin, who's known to care about air quality, is I get calls from individuals complaining about the person just down the hill from them, or in the hotel just down the hill from them, who are lighting their fires going straight into their windows. Mm-hmm. So it's individual versus airshed. So I desperately want to get an understanding of what are you asking of us there are multiple agencies. What is it that we do and we have control over?
Yeah, so when we did the air quality strategy, it was under the old Local Government Act, which was saying that we had to keep to our functions. So that was very much air quality. Now we can look a bit broader because our functions are now more about the four well-beings. Right. But our expertise is about air quality. We cannot touch the building code. It's not in our function. DCC has been quite active in terms of housing quality, less so for QLDC. I think Clutha District Council has some program around providing a low interest rate loan, I believe, yes, for insulation. So it's a little bit different from district to district, and that's where, yes, as a regional council, I think we do have a role into advocating and working with our TAs to agree on who does what and what for, because housing quality is an issue in itself outside of air quality issues.
So that is one thing we could do, is actually work with the TAs and almost do it through our RPS.
So we've got a workshop tomorrow, which unfortunately I don't think you're going to be at, Marion, but one of the very exercises we're talking about what ORCs should do to contribute to those community outcomes we started to draft at the previous workshop, and AIR is one of those activities we will be discussing, along with a whole lot of others.
Are you going to be there?
Our Chief Executive would like to make a comment.
I just wanted to give you some context around what Environment Canterbury does, because it's a good reference point. I don't know it intimately, but they have Healthier Homes Canterbury, which is a voluntary targeted rate for the installation of home heating, insulation and or ventilation. They work to improve heating, insulation, ventilation with outcomes for air quality, energy efficiency, health, and obviously they lead to other outcomes. So they have, just to give you context about how much of an investment this is, their scheme is $20 million.
Yeah, it has to be.
It's really...
They were losing 400 people a year.
And at the moment, they've invested 4.4 million. So in terms of what we've been doing, that is one of the reasons why we said to you, hey, I think we need to take a breath, because, you know, we're making some inroads, but they're relatively small. And actually, we need to think about this in perhaps a different way. In relation to, I've had some conversations with some of you recently talking about the direction that we need from you. And in relation to that, I think the conversations that we aren't currently having but do need to have are around, okay, so if you thought you'd quite like to do air quality and you might like to do something that's going to cost this kind of money, where does that come in the priority list against what we might want to do for biodiversity and what we might want to do for coast and what we might want to do for all of the other priorities that we have to manage. So all I'm saying to you is, you know, there are things out there that we can point to that are much more significant perhaps than the kind of program we've had to date, but we need to be able to put those in context in terms of, well, where do you want to put the investment and where do you want to put the focus?
So, Chairman, can I respond to the CE?
I'll give you an indulgence.
Thank you. It goes like this, which is, we could look at actually prioritize, rather than saying this is too big a problem and compared to our other problems, we could do some priority work. Which area are you going to work in? Are we going to work in education? Are we going to work in replacing burners? Are we going to work with others? And then, on top of that, which areas? Is it Milton? Is it Arrowtown? Do you see what I mean?
Canterbury
intervention points.
Specifically targeted at the lower income, lower socioeconomic situation.
Right.
Which probably means...
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, listen, this is for a discussion we're having. Very useful, these questions. Are there any more just for the moment?
Well, are we going to go on to the submission? Okay. Right, good.
Okay, so let's move along. Gwyneth, we're in your hands.
The next paper is our draft submission for the new NES air quality, and Lisa Hawkins will
I'll just give a quick overview to everybody about what the paper's about. So MFE or the government have released proposed amendments to the National Environmental Standards for Air Quality, or NESAC, as we'll refer to them. We've got until the end of this month to write a submission, so we've prepared a draft submission for you. I guess just to cover off on what the amendments to NESAC are trying to do is they're trying to bring the regulations more in line with what the World Health Organization requirements are around addressing air quality for public health. So they are introducing more stringent regulations around some key elements. The first one being is at the moment the regulations require us to monitor and report on exceedances of particulate matter 10, so PM10. They're now looking at changing that to PM2.5, which is a finer particulate matter. And we have already been, as a council, starting to transition our monitoring over to that in anticipation that that was coming anyway. They're also looking at reducing emission standards for new solid fuel burners, to no more than 1 gram per kg. As Sylvie had mentioned previously, we've already got more stringent controls than that in our air plan for our Air Zone 1 towns. However, this change in this regulation would then apply to our Air Zone 2 and 3. We currently say it's 1.5 for them through our air plan, and that reflects the current NESAC. So this would be bringing those standards down. And then there's some flow-on, changes through NESAC around what that might mean then around identifying your polluted or airsheds that are classified as polluted. So we've put together our submission, and what the bulk of that submission is generally supportive of the amendments of NESAC. Although we do identify to MFE there are a few points which we either request their support or some changes on. So particularly around things like community education, that every council obviously around New Zealand is going to have that challenge now of communicating to their communities, particularly around the PM 2.5, that suddenly the exceedances are going to look a lot worse. For us, they're going to look quite significantly worse, even though air quality itself hasn't necessarily changed. It's how we're reporting it. So requesting MFE to give some thought about how they can help councils in educating and providing that information to their communities. We've also suggested to MFE that they might want to be looking at whether that change to the standard of 1 gram per kg goes low enough. A lot of councils around the country, including ourselves, like I said, have got lower standards than that. The reasoning for us, identifying that request to MFE in terms of going maybe lower than the 1 gram per kg is to bring it in line with what our air strategy says, which is, as Sylvie mentioned before, encouraging our communities to move towards the ultra low emission burners, which are typically lower and reflect the standards we have in our Air Zone 1 at the moment. And then there's some guidance, around just the acknowledgement of the significant policy workload that particularly us, but other councils do have at the moment with a lot of the central government direction coming, that this will potentially require changes to our policies. So in terms of being able to do that in a timely manner, or for MFE being able to do it through certain processes in the RMA to help us speed that up as well, and a transition period of actually being able to monitor and change over to meet the standards as well, recognising that not all councils are on the path that we already are on. So that's, in a nutshell, what our submission covers. So open to questions or comments from council.
Okay, yes, I'll take people in a minute. I'm just going to ask a question. Oh, thank God I'm chair, so I get the first question. And it is this. There's nothing here about the subsidy of electricity prices. So what I'm saying to you is that one of the things that we're trying to point out in this submission is that we're sort of unique. It's very cold, we have inversion layers, and we're down here in the south, and we've got, certainly in some of the airshed areas, lower socioeconomic groups that would possibly or very potentially be financially disadvantaged by change to more stringent conditions. If that's the case, have we picked that up enough in this submission, do you think? Number one. And number two, given that we are, in this submission, as I read it, seeking to improve wood burners in specific, have we picked up that the alternative, if we price those off the market or make them less efficient, is electricity, that the consequences would be even more severe for our constituents.
I don't think that's actually something we cover in the submission at the moment. We do cover, we do request MFE in terms of considering funding or subsidy support that they might be able to provide to councils, but I guess the way we have looked at that at the moment is focusing on wood burn and replacement. So that's not a point that we've currently got in our submission.
Well, could we? Because the government's just admitted or conceded in the COVID recovery, as you know, they've already made the principle. We know you've got a problem, so we're going to subsidise, I think it's for over 65s, a one-off electricity subsidy for over 65s. Well, wait on, if that's the principle that central government seems to have adopted.
It's not for electricity.
To deal...
It's for energy.
Okay, but it is going to be help towards electricity costs.
Not necessarily.
Or firewood. Yeah, exactly.
Or pellets.
So if they've accepted the fact that there is going to be an intervention from central government on the basis of, one assumes, cost and supply, then I would think also that we could be going down that line as well. And I'm not just talking about the over 65s here. There will be significant numbers of low income and middle income families who are about to have the worst economic advantage or disadvantages accrued to them, that are going to find paying a Central Otago electricity bill extraordinarily challenging.
I've an opportunity for natural gas.
I'd love to see natural gas reticulated up here, but unfortunately we don't have that either. Any other questions?
Yes,
I think we have Brian Scott, and then we've got Marion Hobbs.
And
sorry, Alexa. Go, Brian. And Edward, sorry.
I actually was very supportive of your submission, but I just wonder whether you would consider just some comment, just reaffirming that it's a multi-issue, that there's multi-agencies, and it's actually reasonably sort of complicated. And my sense is that until we get some clarity in terms of who's actually driving this thing, we're never going to sort of solve it. And also the fact that we can do all this stuff, but unless houses are insulated and the building code appropriate, then we're going to struggle. Now, we had outlined that, we've got these subsidies and this type of stuff in Milton, for example, but then we also heard that there were practical issues that 3,000 didn't actually cut it, that the people couldn't actually afford to do the gap. So there's, while we're focusing on all, the 2.5 and all this type of stuff, there's some fundamental issues that we need. I don't know if we need some help, but we need to put them on the table and discuss them, and ideally address them with central government. Thank you.
Councillor Hobbs, sorry, you want to answer that question? I think Brian's making a point.
Yeah, we can add a little bit more into under the Otago Air Quality Challenges section, just around that multi-agency approach that will help us specifically.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Hobbs.
I absolutely support the size and down to 2.5. And I also liked, as in paragraph 21, when it was one example of talking about non-regulatory. There are regulations, there's a non-regulatory support, and again, that's a whole, it's coming in through a number of angles, whether it's cost of energy or whatever. I want to ask you something. You haven't got it in there because it was never in the original NES. It's ports are excluded from air quality control. I would love you to ask the question, why are ports excluded from air quality control? There is an enormous issue there. Says she, and she now declares, I live near the port with the bloody...
That now, Maren.
What?
You're free to advocate like that.
I know, it's delicious.
Councillor Forbes.
Oh, thank you. I agree with what you're doing, and I think there's a lot of things that are really good about it, but I think it's all pointless if we don't look at the wider system of building, and there's enough been said about that, so I won't go that way, but the issues are much wider. But I think the point that hasn't been made yet is that energy poverty would be reduced if higher building standards were in place. And I think that's a piece that's missing from our submission.
Even in England, yeah.
And I think further back in the proposed amendments, there's a lot of, we've failed to reach past standards as far as I can tell, and we've got new standards. So it doesn't actually mean a thing. So unless we have a way of actually enforcing those standards, and you have the problem that that Michael brings up, Michael Laws, around the energy poverty. But if we don't have a way of doing that, we can amend everything all we like. So it's going to make absolutely not a blind difference, and that's wrong. So we need to go back to that building position, and we need to figure out how we reduce energy poverty. And most of those tools are in central government, because I don't think our enforcement's ever going to happen. It hasn't happened now. Why would it happen? How do we go and tell Michael's neighbour that he doesn't burn coal and his family goes cold, even though his son's dying of asthma? I'm sorry, not your
we have done that. And we've done it by
neighbour.
working through DCC.
Yeah. So
brilliantly done.
I think we need to really look at that, and it's just pointless amending something if we don't get it right. And I think government needs to help.
Maybe we should go to PM20, because that way the stats will actually improve.
Edward.
Oh, sure. Excellent papers and presentations. I'm just going to talk to the submission, which I'm probably repeating what's already said. I think it's a good submission in terms of the air quality standards being changed, but really we need to broaden and include those other parallel issues that may be outside. It's not diverting from the council's responsibilities, but it's an opportunity to advocate for all of government approach and influence so that all sectors work together. I was pretty clear there's a call for extra funding in the paper that was presented earlier, but there must be more effective if it's a collaborative approach across the board. So that's my point. Thanks.
Okay, and Councillor Kate, and then Councillor Kevin.
I'm going to take a slightly contrary position, and I'm absolutely for the health of our communities, don't get me wrong, but I'm really, and measuring at 2.5 is fine. What I do have an issue with is a suggestion that everyone can get to 2.5 equitably and the need is the same. And I think there's a nuance there. I live in an area which I think it's an area is in 3. We rely very greatly on fires because we often have interrupted electricity flows, and especially in snowfalls or really bad weather times. And what I want to understand is, why don't we nuance that we should be putting most energy into those airshed 1 places to get the change and confirm the change, and understand the loss of efficiency with the ULEBs, whatever they are, before we go to that next step, because if we do everything at once, we actually won't get the best change we may need. I think we should concentrate on airshed 1s, move 2 places into airshed 1s, and I've got another question about Dunedin as well after that.
Just through you, Chair, just to respond to that question, I guess that's the role of our air plan, and that's what the air plan's tried to do by saying that we've set more stringent standards for air zone 1s. What NESAC, I guess, is doing is setting the standard across everything. So they're bringing that standard down to 1, so that will apply to our air zone 2 and 3s. If we chose to then to undertake a plan change to our air plan to drop air zone 2, for example, to below 1, then we could. What we're saying, though, is that because we know from the monitoring we do in our air zone 1 and 2 towns that we need to move our communities to ULBs as best we can, and to also be preventative, I guess, because a lot of the problems we have with air quality is responding to once the problem's there rather than kind of being preventative to creating a problem, then maybe dropping that standard within NESAC to apply to all of the whole region and to every region across the country lower than 1 is something that MFE should consider.
Yeah, but in rural areas where there is going to be less trouble, and it's that balance of that less efficiency, and I think that needs nuancing, because there's actually areas, Middlemarch can barely, for example, and I'm not just talking about me, but can barely take much more electricity draw. It's got a limited electricity supply. If we've got a whole lot more houses, you don't want to get them going off power because there's too many houses, because they don't have fires in them. But we don't have an airshed issue, I don't think. And so what I really want is that the ECA funding can go to Arrowtown, not to go to areas necessarily that don't have the same risk? Or am I misunderstanding all of this?
No, I guess from a clarification perspective, though, for the submission, I guess I just want to understand, are you worried that if we are suggesting to MFE that they drop that standard below 1, that would have an unequitable impact across some areas in Otago that, from your perspective, you don't think necessarily need to be dropped to that perspective?
The monitoring part
supportive of us
the monitoring is one thing. The effect, though, shouldn't be that. There's two parts of this. One, that a whole lot of resources, ECA funding or whatever, goes into areas where the problem isn't the highest, because I think we need to concentrate on those Miltons and Narrowtowns and whatever. But equally, if I don't think I have had explained to me the efficiency drop with the ULEB for heating compared to a PM10. And if there's a substantial loss in the efficiency of heating, where that might take us?
So thermal efficiency from heating, and Sarah, jump in if I get this wrong, because you might know more about this, but the NESAC maintains the same thermal efficiency at 65%. So PM10 is, PM2.5 is one thing, we're monitoring that, but then they're saying that as part of monitoring that, in addition to monitoring to PM 2.5, they're wanting to set new standards so that any burners that are installed into homes meet a new standard, so they have lower emissions.
Appreciate
that. That's the 1 gram that they're now suggesting we should go to. So PM 2.5 is kind of it's accepted well practice that's what we should be monitoring to. What that will mean for us is it will show that we have more exceedances in places that we monitor. It won't necessarily change, I guess, for people. If there's no impact to the person, it's impact to how we respond. The impact to the person or to communities is if they're replacing their burners, they're now going to have to replace them with those that are going to have lower emissions. So going below the 1 gram per kilogram is what we're suggesting MFE might want to think about, because then that is encouraging our communities to actually look at the ULEB burners rather than just low emission burners.
But in that process, sorry, I may have missed it in the report or reports, because sorry, I'm finding it hard to pull them all apart. But in my mind, there was a question mark left whether they were as efficient, cost effectively, for people burning and heating their houses, ULEB. That thermal efficiency, it wasn't neutral in the report.
So the thermal efficiency is currently in NESAC is at 65%. So every burner that goes in must meet thermal efficiency of 65% and must also meet an emission standard that's set within the standards. MFE are proposing to maintain that 65%. What we have heard, and anecdotally, because we haven't looked at it, and what we're hearing from other councils, is that there are technologies out there now that are going to drop that thermal efficiency a little bit under 65%. But we'll get a much greater gain in emissions. So what we had suggested to MFE is that they might want to be mindful of the fact by just leaving the thermal efficiency at 65% might actually close off the opportunities for some new technologies to be developed that will address emission rates but still maintain a pretty good thermal efficiency that might be like 64 or 62%.
Yeah, well, I'm just really concerned about that in Airshed 3 where it isn't an issue and yet the efficiency may be a big issue. And but I didn't see anything about 62, 64. I wasn't sure what it was.
Yeah.
Okay. Kevin and then Gary.
Just two wee ones. So that thermal efficiency 65%. Well, really the question is, will that heater still heat my house? It is probably my worry about it. So, and you're telling me it will. But if it doesn't, I'm going to have to either put another one down the next room, so I've got 2 of them going, or I'm going to.
There's no change to NESAC. That's an accepted standard. 65% thermal efficiency is accepted as being appropriate for people to be able to use as a heating source.
Right. So getting away from the domestic area, what impact will this have on? And have you mapped this out on industries and businesses around Otago?
So the only impact that this may have is where there's a polluted airshed, which now has to be being monitored against 2.5. So there might be some more, I guess that might change how we view our polluted airsheds. And they're trying to look at now, they had the MFE haven't actually in their amendments settled on what the discharge limit would be for industries or things like that might need to be applying for a discharge into those airsheds. They haven't settled on that limit as yet. What we have flagged to them, because we haven't done the investigative work to work out what that limit might be, where our consenting team would actually have to refuse consent if their discharge is above a certain level set within the standards, that they need to be thinking about the implications to councils around compliance of those things, around monitoring of those things, and making sure that whatever level they set for that discharge, you actually do get the, the desired air quality impacts that they're after. So there is potentially some impact for industry through this, but it's hard to quantify because MFE themselves haven't put a discharge limit down on paper as part of these amendments as yet. They're seeking guidance from people on that.
We've got a long, whatever we say, we've got a long way to go before anything's going to happen. Gary.
Thank you. The submission really worries me. I don't support going from PM10 as a regulatory monitoring tool to PM 2.5. I think it's just setting a different parameter we can't enforce under PM10, let alone PM 2.5. So it sets up the community to see a situation worse than a situation that we need to rectify through other tools. It really worries me around the one size fits all across the entire region. So in echoing the concerns raised by Councillor Wilson, I think we need to focus on our airshed 1 areas and look at the solutions that have to fit within those airshed 1 areas. And the overall undertone through all of the papers, and certainly I think from central government, is away from solid fuel burners, and I don't believe the science and the understanding and the monitoring is fully well enough understood yet. So that really worries me too, because our fragile power network, power or electricity, is not the solution in the short or long term, I believe, in our most fragile towns. So that's right, so I'm quite concerned about it.
So, Councillor Carmen.
Thank you. I probably take a little bit of a different view to my learned friend here. I do support that we have to do something. And if Marion doesn't mind, I borrow her thing where we've got multiple problems with multiple agencies. There's just something else I'd like to add to this, whether you write it in or you just think about it, which is this. The impact in our communities, it's also the access. Now, this might seem an unusual thing I'm saying to you with energy poverty. I met a couple on my last election who actually qualified for a handout, but they didn't have a car. And the plumber lived and had his business in Balclutha, and they couldn't go and view the burner. So they never actually ended up with it, which I felt was quite a sad story. So what I'm saying is there are places like this that exist if we could, if we can move forward, and if there is the burner that we can find, that we make it accessible for people to, in that area. I never would have factored that in, but they just couldn't get there. And it's probably more what we don't realise of a lot of our communities.
I'll make it quick.
Okay.
It's just in response to Gary. PM10 versus PM 2.5. It's not just a regulatory issue, it's the health issue. The 2.5, it's been found over the last period of time that if you want to have a measure for human health safety, that actually PM10 is no good to you. It's actually 2.5 gets down to the stuff that really impacts on our human health. So, to say, oh, let's ignore, it's a bit like Trump saying ignore the virus, it is what it is. The 2.5 is where it's at in terms of a barometer for human health.
Okay. We'll see. Listen, this really isn't, you won't have the debate now. I assume we're in it. All right, so we've asked questions and we're sort of in the debate now, because the issue is whether or not we want that submission to go forward in its guise. I guess what I'm going to ask you now, Gwyneth, before we formally get to resolve that one way or the other, is what amendments, as a result of those comments, are you likely to make to the submission?
All right, now I'll have a go, and Lisa will. We've both taken notes here, so hopefully they're relying on there. So we had We had a discussion around the need for subsidies across multiple fuels, and we were going to put in an example of electricity costs and refer to the example of the COVID example that's just come through. So we'll add in something around and use the latest national policy as an example. We had the discussion around the multi-issue and multi-agencies, and I would add potentially multiple benefits. And so we will add an additional piece in there in terms of the need to work across agency and understand the multiple factors and issues at play. We will put in a question around why ports are excluded from the emissions.
Sorry, what was it?
Why ports are excluded from emissions. Yep, that was one of the questions. Number 4, I had a comment. We want some commentary in there around how if you decrease energy poverty, we can decrease energy poverty with a better housing stock. So I guess this is again pointing to the conversation we had around the different types of interventions and talking to housing stock as one of the potential solutions. We had the discussion around there's Edwards around there's an need for a collaboration and an all-of-government approach, and that's as a result of those multiple issues. And so can we consider that in terms of the standard? And I had number 6, emphasis. So we had a discussion around the emphasis on specific airsheds versus and the efficiency. Now, to be honest, I'm not quite sure what we're doing in the submission on that versus what we might do as part of our air plan or our implementation plan in terms of take on board the message around working around on local and understanding the local impact. But I'm still not sure that we got a clear direction as to whether you want us to say something around that 65% efficiency.
No, well, yeah, we'll come to that in a second.
Yep, the final one is
You're still going, Gwyneth.
Yep, so the final one was we just need clarification around the table around Gary's comment around support of the 2.5 versus the 10 in terms of monitoring.
All right, so you've asked 2 specific questions. Those were the last 2 issues. The one was the 65% and the other was 2.5 versus 10. Listen, I don't intend to belabour these issues, so let's go. 65%, are we happy with what's in the paper, or would that like to be changed? Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against?
Sorry, favour of change, or sorry?
Favour of changing what's in the paper.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, shall we start that again then? Right, no, I'll go the other way. I'll put it as a positive, not as a negative. Those in favour of the submission staying as it is on the 65% issue, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against?
No, against, yeah.
Okay, carried. On the issue of 2.5 or 10, those in favour of the submission staying in favour of 2.5, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against?
Aye.
You mean no?
Yep.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Aye, I'm against.
Cool. So you've got the answer on those 2. Cool. I'm happy with everything that you've listed there. Is there anything else? Kevin?
Oh, just, and perhaps from Cosy Homes might even be able to help me on this. I just wonder if there's been any work done, say in Milton, where if we change that deprivation levels that we seem to fund to, if we change them down from this 8, 9 and 10 now, if we took that back to 6 and 7, for instance, how much more uptake would actually get, and how much impact that would have on those high shared areas.
Before we even go there,
yeah,
we're making a submission on a national policy statement, or proposed, as I understand it, not on what our policy will be.
You know what I'm saying?
All right, so I want to keep it just on this national level.
Yeah.
Great. Is there any more discussion on this matter? The issue then becomes, do we accept that we are making the submission as amended to the government on the national policy statement on air quality, is it?
We need your endorsement so we can then take it formally to council.
Yeah. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you. Well done. Yes, I moved from the chair and it was seconded by Councillor Robertson. Thank you. Yes, I think we should have a break. It is 3 o'clock. Come and have a coffee. I've asked them to make some extra.
3 on the dot. Well done.
Say for what taking it there and up streets, and you get some information there. Got them onto the accounts, and got them once one did, the next person went. Yeah.
take both these items?
So yes, Sarah,
And
who's
someone's behind me?
Yep, Sarah on Zoom, Sarah Harrison on Zoom. She's the author of both of these. So both these papers, the annual air quality report and the Arrowtown ones, were due to come to you pre-lockdown. Have been sitting there waiting to come for a little while. Just put that in context, just as we had to readjust agendas. But yes, happy to take the paper as read, Sarah, unless
Well, first
do you want to
of all,
do
take
some
questions before we have any debates or anything like that. I'm going to make questions brief. Councillor Hobbs and then Councillor Wilson. And then Councillor.
Paragraph 6. Otago has a network of 7 monitoring stations in the following locations, and you say central Dunedin. Do you move these monitoring stations around?
It's better to not move them, but sometimes we have to. There's been an instance in Alexandria where we moved our site in 2017 because the property was no longer available to hold the site. And currently the site in Dunedin, we are looking at moving that because same thing, they're demolishing and building a new 7-storey building right next to it, so we might have to move that as well.
Okay. I'm unhappy about that.
Okay, now Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Forbes, then Councillor Robertson.
Paragraph 24. You reference in the central Dunedin site that it's got State Highway 1 beside it, and it seems to be the site with the highest traffic, I think. Just wondering what is the particular matter or the effect of traffic on air emissions in a site like that?
But for that site, there is actually very little influence of home heating. So probably most of the particular matter would either come from traffic or industry in that area.
Yeah.
But
yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry. We don't have a breakdown exactly. We haven't done a source apportionment or anything like that recently to know exactly how much is traffic, how much is industry.
Okay.
Right. Now, Councillor Forbes, sorry.
In paragraph 42, you say that a transformative change may be required, is likely to be required. Do you have a picture of what that might look like? And I guess that means what are the solutions? And why I'm asking this, as I heard from a NIWA scientist, Francesca, that we needed to get rid of all wood burners. Is that what you think the transformation looks like?
I'm not going to let you answer that question.
Okay.
That's a policy question, I think, rather than.
Can I say though? Can I just say so the opportunity to look at the scale and potentially increase the different types of implementation actions we do is through the LT plan. And I'll touch on that just as a closing element. But the reason the word transformation is there is because the work we've done to date has shifted the dial, but perhaps, and this is a question we should come back to you on, how far do you want to shift that dial in terms of change? And that will give us an idea about scale of implementation actions.
Yes, I just want to explain, Councillor Forbes, what I meant by that is that this is a receiving report.
I accept that.
And so we're going to, I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunities for policy development on it. Councillor Robertson.
Thanks. Just following on from what Councillor Hobbs was talking about, and have we monitored other areas or do we shift the sites around? So
according to the wind.
You know because you're involved in writing the current standards, but we have to monitor in the worst site in each airshed. So we need to find where that is. So in the past we have shifted sites, and we've done things like having a car driving around with a monitor on the top of it, and it's specifically looking for, this was the monitoring gear in the past, looking for the worst sites and parking up overnight essentially, literally that. And Dunedin shifted as well, and depends, we could have more than one site as well at any time, looking for the worst one, or monitoring more than one is fine as well. But yeah, it's a good question as to what is our program going forward, and is the new standards likely to still require the worst site? And how are we going to determine what that is a good question. Yeah.
Gwyneth, would you like to answer that? Oh, Sylvia. Sarah.
Sarah, do you want to answer those?
Yeah, for sure. We need to update the air plan, and so we were going to look at reviewing the monitoring network as part of that work as well. And especially with these new standards, it would be ideal to go back and look at all of the airsheds and make sure that they're categorised into the correct airsheds, and do something similar to how they were set up in the first place, back when the first air plan was written.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
No, just happy to move when you're ready for that.
All right, Councillor Hope, then Councillor Scott, then Councillor Malcolm.
I have a funny question, which is the appendix on page 44 is exceedance table for 2019. Now it's just for over a month. It starts the 25th of May 2019 and it ends on the 27th of the 6th. This is great, and this is winter. But what we have noticed is there is also some very, very cold summer nights. You might not experience them, but we certainly do in middle March. We've had some really, really freezing. And I just want to know, are we always going to monitor this in winter? Stupid question, I know, but the seasons are changing.
Yeah, we monitor 4 sites year round and 3 sites in winter only, but we've never had an exceedance in summer. But if we did, it would show up in one of the sites that we monitor all year. But we haven't monitored middle March, so I wouldn't say.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Scott, Councillor Malcolm.
Yeah, I haven't got a question. I just want to make a statement. Yeah.
No.
Why not?
Because this is question time.
Okay. When you've finished, are there any other questions? Then
there are. Okay. Councillor Malcolm.
On page 36, mean winter concentrations comparisons, am I correct in assuming that is a pretty good trend? While they're...
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So all I'm saying, while we're concerned about airsheds and what's happening, and there is bad patches, but looking at that graph, obviously there's some work being done that possibly is working.
Yeah, so these are to sort of compare what's been going on 2019 compared to the previous 3 years. So 2019 was actually quite a warm year, as you might remember. Especially compared to this year, we've had about 56 exceedances already, and it's only halfway through winter. So this is just really to sort of compare it to something really. But trends wise, we are also improving. But because last year was such a good year, I would really hesitate to say that part of that trend. We would need to look at this year and the next year.
Yeah. So can I just finish on that one? So clearly you're doing, so this comparison could also come out with temperatures. I mean, it's probably quite easy to do on electricity because you've got a meter that says, it's a certain temperature, and that's how much electricity I've used. But a wood burners, you don't actually know how much you're burning, and do you? Your volumes, it's pretty hard to. It'd be neat to have that with the temperatures, but now your explanation gives that to me.
Really hard to attribute this given just to temperatures because wind speed plays a large part in whether there'll be an inversion layer or not. So there are ways to use temperature and wind speed to predict exceedances.
I can confirm what you're saying, Sarah, and that is last year was a mild winter, and this year, dear Lord, the inversion layer has been appalling. Councillor Mariam.
Does each night, when you measure the PM, do you also measure the temperature and wind?
Yes.
Both direction and velocity?
Yes.
You do? Okay, thank you. It's because it's the still nights that are a real problem.
Yeah.
Now, those are our questions. We're now moving towards the adoption or the acknowledgement of the report. And Councillor Scott, this is where your statement comes in. So would you like to move that?
Yeah, to receive the report.
Yep. And do I have a seconder? Yep. Councillor Malcolm. Right. Brian, go for your life.
Look, just simply to say, there's been some comment about incremental improvement. Well, that may be right, but for as long as I've been on council, we've been struggling with this particular issue. And when you look at the number of exceedances in the table that are there, particularly in terms of airshed 1, number 35, 6, 25, 13, 0, 24, they are significant. And the comment that we need a transformational change, I fully support. We have a responsibility, as I understand it, to fulfil the NES for air, yeah? Yes. And we need to get on and do it. And that needs to be, I think, as you're intimating, that needs to be part of the LTP process, that we need to do something different, because what we're currently doing is not good enough.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment on this matter? Councillor Malcolm, you seconded it, so then.
Can I speak? Yeah. So, and agree with Councillor Scott's comments, but with a slight variation that it is actually critical to acknowledge the good work that we are doing. And yes, we need to keep improving, but let's acknowledge the good work. That otherwise, people are going to get pretty annoyed with trying to do things when it's either they're not being appreciated or the record that they're doing good is not shown. So agree with Councillor Scott, but let's keep getting the pat on the backs to keep people going.
I have a concern that we're doing 2 more years of monitoring and our communities want some action now, and I'm not sure how we resolve that, but I just wanted to throw that into mix. Some note a blame or even a question really, but anyone's got a comment?
And all I would like to do in summarising this is record a note of caution that this is an almost intractable problem that has bedevilled us for a long, long time, and I suspect will in the future as well. But we must always be sure that any policy changes that we make don't make things worse in a generic and socio-economic sense. All right. Now, it has been moved by Councillor Scott, seconded by Councillor Malcolm. All those in favour of receiving the report, please say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Arrowtown Air Quality Implementation. Right. Have we got somebody else joining you, Gwyneth?
So it's again Sarah's paper. This is a paper on a specific project. It was a first project as part of that implementation plan. It was a project done in Arrowtown last winter. Sarah, did you want to introduce or just take us through it?
Yeah. Arrowtown project report outlines the work program undertaken in 2019. There were 2 parts to this work. One was a promise campaign, council had implement a concept plan. The second part was to conduct monitoring to start identifying non-compliant business or difficulty of doing behaviour, and to begin the conversation with owners of those properties about them becoming compliant. So this is really like the first project especially in recent years, and especially for to start doing compliance for burners.
Okay. Any questions first of all? There being none, I need a second. First of all, a mover and a seconder. Kate to move, Councillor Marion to second. Right. Any questions? I have one, if I might, and it's this. Sorry, just a question, and it's this. Do you have an update for 2020? So these stats are 2019 based, and we now know from the previous discussion that we had, Sarah, that it was a mild year, so that's why the stats were down. Where are the stats for Arrowtown on your preliminary readings for 2020, please?
In terms of the impact of the work that we did on air quality?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so because it takes such a long time to look at air quality trends in terms of years, I don't have any, but that will, hopefully by the end of this year into next year, I'll be able to look at that. It's really hard to say just because winter this year is very cold.
Right.
Just
okay.
As an update on the project.
Sure, go.
So, Sarah, do you want to just articulate what we're doing this year in Arrowtown as follow-up for that project?
Yeah, so the work from last year really highlighted the fact that rental properties are one of the issues for both non-compliant burners and behaviour. So we'd really like to follow up on the non-compliant burner issue in Arrowtown because of the current financial climate with COVID-19, we feel that following up with rental property owners might be unsuitable for people in Otago, and so not try and go after people that don't have the resources to do anything about it.
Okay, so you've just heard that explanation. Are you satisfied with essentially the position of stasis that we've reached at the moment, or are you seeking to give a further mandate? No, everybody seems happy with that. Gwyneth? Right, so moved and seconded. All those in favour of accepting this report, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. 9.5, air quality next steps, noting that this will inform, and this is where we'll have the huge discussion at the long-term plan on this matter. I'll just move that we accept 9.5, seconded by Councillor Hope. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Water bottling issues and options. Thank you to... Oh, she's gone.
I was going to say, had I been able to speak to the last question, congratulations on the quality of the report.
I was just going to say thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, could you please pass on our thanks to Sarah and the team?
Mm-hmm.
She's gone.
No, she's probably still there.
Oh, she's still there? Thank you, Sarah.
That's great.
Ah.
Was good.
All right, now 10.1, water bottling. Issues and options. I think I'm responsible for this, but I don't know. Probably you and I, Marion.
Not me.
Oh, Alexa. I think we brought this up.
Oh, yes, I do want
Water
to.
bottling.
Yeah, I do want to say something on it. It's now my moment. Yes.
Yep, it is. Okay, now this, I'm assuming that everybody has read it.
Yeah.
It's been a vexed political issue for a number of councils for a good period of time. The issue is the science versus the sentiment in one side, because the volumes of water as a huge component are not that great, but it's about sometimes messages that a community receives and sends and perceives. This report has been asked for as a consequence of the letter that was sent to us on the 20th of February from the Chief Executive of the Queensland Lakes District Council. And it provides a series of options at the end as to what we may or may not do. Assuming that we've all read the report, would you care to summarise those options for us, please, Gwyneth or Sylvie?
I was just going to say this is another paper that's been delayed due to COVID. It's now back on the agenda. That's just why that letter was written in January 20, and we're just seeing it today.
That's all right.
Did you want to?
Could you just take us through page 61, the options that are there, please? We know what the issue is. We've read it. Now, could you take us through the options that exist for this council?
Yeah, sure. The options are really about are we going to get a specific policy framework on water bottling in our RMA document, so either the RPS or our new or the future freshwater and land plan, or are we going to have some policy outside of the RMA around specific issues around water bottling? Obviously, we cannot, how to say, forego the. I mean, there's a process to develop the RPS and the freshwater and land plan. So this is not we have to go through this process. In terms of having policies outside of our plans, there are some risks that we have to be mindful of in terms of making sure that we are seen as being as implementing our plans without prejudice. Some of the issues related to water bottlings are around plastic and plastic waste. So there are some options around advocacy with the government around the issues, the management of plastic waste.
Councillor Alexa,
Shall I
go
put
for your
through
life.
a perspective that I would like to, so I've just got to go back to the note page that I had it on. Or where have I gone to? Sorry, give me 1 second. Here it is. Okay, so going back to page 56, and you talk about it not being unique, and I agree with you. It's not unique, and that water bottling is a mere drop in a bucket of water in terms of extraction for commercial gain. There's lots of it that goes on everywhere, totally get that. But we're being asked, I think, by that letter to make a temporary ban, or I think that's what they're trying to do, while we investigate some sort of framework for regulation. I'm told by the people that have contacted me about this that it is a currently unregulated area. So just hold that thought for a minute, because I may not be entirely correct. But if it is, it's quite reasonable for us to agree to a ban until we investigate whether it should be regulated. And the quantum becomes beside the point then. It doesn't matter that it's very little bit of water. Other water extraction industries, such as farming, mining and forestry, do have regulatory frameworks. I agree with you in point 9. And then it's about looking ahead. We might not be facing trouble managing the effects of large consents to bottled water, but other councils are. And we could be next. You know, Christchurch City is, Upper Hutt, Greater Wellington are among them. And the ORC could add rules to its water plan to specifically manage the taking of water for bottling. So I kind of think we need to think about this. And I think the comparison with irrigation is misleading. Water bottlers don't take surface or shallow groundwater. They take the very best drinking water. And given the issues with nitrates in some of our water resources, particularly in other parts of the country, there's an argument to be had that our deepest and best water should be protected for domestic and community supply. And that's where my concerns are. And I don't think we've addressed those in this paper. I think we have a responsibility to ensure that drinking water providers have sufficient clean water for domestic and community supply, and it's possible that at some time in the future that'll be threatened if we allow unfettered water bottling. And that's before we even start on the plastic issue. This is just me.
I think it's misleading to say that water bottling is not regulated at the moment, because it's still subject to our water plan and our allocated framework. So we are looking at consents, and we are looking at the environmental effects of water bottling consents in Otago. We putting a short-term moratorium whilst we develop the freshwater and land plan still requires a plan change, and that takes time. So that's a decision that I guess this council has to make, is whether it's worthwhile doing a plan change on water bottling specifically. Yeah.
Okay, so it is held in a framework, but only in a framework that judges its direct environmental effects. That wouldn't consider the value of that best of our best water being bottled and taken offshore. It couldn't, could it? No,
we don't
it couldn't possibly.
No.
We don't regulate the...
No.
Someone can jump in if I'm wrong here, but we don't regulate the quality of the water that's taken.
But that's the concern.
I guess wine goes overseas too.
Okay, no, I'm going to keep this in order, please. Keep this in order.
Can I just add a point to that then?
Okay, point of information from the Chief Executive.
I'm just thinking about the freshwater MPS and the signals around hierarchy in terms of water for obviously the environment, and then water for human health. And so potentially you could connect those dots in terms of some kind of thinking about, if that water is the most pristine drinking water available, the use of that for human health purposes, i.e. drinking water, which would come ahead of other commercial uses. So that might be a way to look at it.
And we would do that through our water plan.
Do it through the water plan? We will be doing it through the water plan?
We can.
Well, if we have to
we can do it through the water plan. Yeah. But before the water plan, sorry about the point of clarification, but before the water plan would require a plan change. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. Councillor, and now you might want to think about that in the interim, Councillor Alexa.
I will. Yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
Before we get to the end of this item. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, okay, a couple of things. Firstly, from a personal perspective, I'm not happy about the plastic either, but I think it's been clarified that if you're taking water, that it will be regulated through a consent and so forth. The marvellous thing about bottled water is it's amazing. It only takes 1 litre of water to make 1 litre of bottled water. It's amazing. Like, if you compare that with dairy, it takes 250 litres of water to make 1 litre of milk. If you compare that with a bottle of wine, if you compare that to a bottle of wine, it takes something like 1,000 litres of water to make 1 litre of wine. And here we are getting stuck into this. You please just be aware of the President. If we get in, there's bigger fish on this issue. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment. I appreciate where Councillor Forbes is going with this, but personally I feel, and I defer actually to Edward and Lynn, but the deepest, best water actually is best left in the ground and not touched at all for humans of any sort, because otherwise you just get the leachates down if you've caused problems higher up. And I just hope whatever you are going to come up with, we don't get to the point where we say it's okay at all to take water right down deep.
Would I be particularly interested in an iwi perspective about this time?
Yes. The report says at 41, paragraph 41, I think it is.
Yes, it is.
That there is no, sorry, yeah, it is 41. There is at present no firm ground on specific reasons, cultural reasons. I think we would go with option 3 because there is in the iwi Resource Management Plan an objective that refers to the unresolved issues surrounding water ownership. So an iwi position is a bit higher in the hierarchy in terms of the overview view there. I understand water bottling and it's all around consenting. It's not ownership. It's not selling water, selling the actual water. But iwi are watching that closely. They're concerned about crossover.
All right. Now, I'm going to now try and advance this by suggesting, you've suggested that we take option 3. Would you like to move it? You haven't moved an option yet, and would you like to move that?
I certainly will.
Do we have a seconder?
Yes, I'll second.
We have a seconder from Councillor Robertson. Right. Now, that motion is on the floor. We have moved. Now, an option now governs our discussion. Thank you, Edward.
Is it all of the motions plus 5 being option 3?
No, so what, Edward, can I take you to my page 62? You are in 63. There are provided with 5 options by staff. Essentially, they go from doing nothing to really, in a funny sort of way, probably almost a middle course, which is what Edwards is suggesting. He has moved it. I'm delighted, Edward, that we have a motion. Thank you. I have a seconder. Now, who seconded that? Councillor Robertson, would you like to speak to that motion and then we'll go through the normal speaking order, standing orders?
Yeah, I just think this is the most effective way of dealing with the issue, which is multifaceted. We've talked around some of the issues for this council in dealing with the matter. Things like considering plastic and waste are difficult for us through this process. Much wider issues around cultural impact of taking that water as well as the environmental. It's a holistic issue that should be dealt with at a national level. Thank you.
Councillor Marion.
Is there any possibility to the mover and seconder of combining option 2 and option 3? Option 2 does take some representation inside the RMA, but and at the same time we continue to advocate at central government to put a stop to water bottling in New Zealand. Do you see what I'm trying to do?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, they're not mutually exclusive.
No, they're not.
No. Now, I just want to clarify something with you, Edward, because I'm not sure that it quite picks up what you're saying. If we stop water bottling in New Zealand, that presumes that we will never be able to buy water in this country in a bottle. Now, I don't think that's what you mean.
No, you're right, quite right, Mr. Chairman, I do. It's more of the options. That's the one that puts it back to the government.
So it's not like filling a tap in, for example, at the Coca-Cola factory in Penrose and selling us bottled water like Pump, for example.
Yes.
This is about taking freshwater sources from springs and the like and stopping that kind of water bottling. That's what you're talking about, isn't it?
It is, and I do take Councillor Hobbs' point. I think that's...
So you're happy to merge 2 and 3?
Yes.
With that clarification?
Yes.
All right, so if we got that clarified, Councillor Malcolm.
Can we have your clarification couched in option 3 then? Because
Right, sure.
to me that looks as though we're going to end up with no bottled water at all anywhere.
I think would the word be spring or what's the word when you've got it? Sorry, I'm not a scientist. The stuff that you put it aquifer.
Or is it about commercial water bottling?
Well, you're going to, like I say, if you open the tap, for example, Marion, and put it through a filter in Penrose, it probably is not going to be a problem. I think we've got a specific problem that we're seeking to address
the
here.
source of it. Okay.
Yeah. So we'll do spring or aquifer.
The recommendations are on page 56. Right, it's just there's a whole lot of other questions I just got. I was asking you that he's doing all of those.
Because the first one not here.
There's a 56 on you. Mine printed out. Copy of 62.
So receive the report, notes, rejects, and then it's just rewording by all stuff. Apologies.
So those are the recommendations. You're right.
Well, no, they need to be changed slightly.
They do.
No, we're going to go to. Okay, I'll take you through this then. 1, 2, and then we'll go to 3 is covered by yours, Marion, I think. And then you can note.
Oh, yeah.
All right?
Yeah. Come down to the...
And then we'll go.
I'm a bit worried about
Well,
3.
actually, wait on. We don't need to do this. We don't need to do any of this. This is just a staff recommendation. Sorry.
Yeah.
We'll just receive this report.
Yeah.
We'll move the staff report and we will choose option X. Okay, so we'll receive the report in its entirety. Thank you very much to staff for providing it. And then we will move to, okay? All right, we'll move to the combination of option 2 and 3.
Thank you.
Which has been moved and seconded. All right, all those in favour of, I'll move from the chair. Do I have a seconder for receiving the report? Yep. Councillor Hope, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And can I say staff, thank you very much. This is very full and extensive, outstanding. Right, next issue, we will choose option 2. That we move with a combination of option 2 and 3 as amended. Moved by Councillor Ellison. Quasi-Councillor Ellison, I don't know, but moved by our iwi partner, seconded by Councillor Robertson. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against?
Aye.
Right, so it's passed by the majority. Thank you very much. Moving on.
Can I clarify what the amendment of the wording to option 3 is? Sorry,
yes,
just so that we're really
reads,
clear.
Advocate central government to discourage and put a stop to spring or aquifer water bottling in New Zealand. Cool. Okay. Now, this is the most important part of this, and I hope we've left ourselves enough time. Gwyneth, 10.2.
Yeah, I've got over an hour.
Can I just ask for some direction here? I'm obviously conflicted on plan change 7, and that's fine. I'm finding it hard to understand which parts of this report I sit on.
No. This is, well, I can rule from the chair on this one. You are not conflicted on this issue. There is no plan change that affects you specific. This is a national policy direction.
Yes.
Well, I can't decide that, but I am advising. Okay, I am advising you. If you choose to absent yourself from the table, you may do so. All right? It's your choice.
I will leave. Push myself out when I know that it's good when I can't.
Fine.
Team up there, yeah.
If it looks like getting anywhere near middle March, I'll send you out there myself. Gary, all right, you're happy? Everybody, nice to welcome you. Could you introduce your team, Gwyneth, and tell us what they're going to do?
I can. So this paper's on the relatively recent Action for Healthy Waterways MPS FM, or the freshwater package, which includes the MPS and some NES. So we have Anita, I'm sure you've met before, manager of the policy team, but now a permanent member of staff. Tom, team leader of the Land and Water team within the policy group, and Delana's also been working. She's another member of the Land and Water policy team.
But it's not about the current stuff that's just come out in the last week. It is?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay.
Yes.
So it is a bit, but it also notes, if you see the recommendations on page 67, there are 4 recommendations, including Plan Change 8, which I think is where Kate notes that she might be in conflict, and Plan Change 1. But these are notings rather than policy issues. You're going to provide us with information. We are all ears.
So this paper just outlines the decisions from central government that were recently released on the Action for Healthy Waterway package, and outlines what the implications are for ORC. Basically, the paper indicates that there's no or little change from what came out in 2019, that there's a huge implementation effort required, but really no change to our planning program or the timing of our planning. It does align, the new package does align with our current work, in particular Plan Change 8, although there are some things that are slightly modified. I'd just like to draw your attention to a small typo in paragraph 25 where it says that things are required to happen by 1 July 2013. That should be 1 July 2023.
Oh, yes.
Right. Now, are there any questions related to this paper? Oh, well, while my colleagues are considering that, can I take you to and the Chief Executive might like to comment on this, paragraph 50, the financial considerations. Now, they've been costed at $76 million, I assume, by the sector across the country. Have we drilled down and worked out roughly where we are and what our costs are likely to be?
No, not in any specific detail. And some of the reasoning for that is because throughout the LTP process, we need to have some conversations with you about the choices you want to make around implementation, and also how you want to best provide support for farmers to comply, and also about the approach that you want to take, I guess, to some of this work. We do know that some of this will be resource intensive and that we will have more resource consents to deal with. We will have a greater compliance load to deal with. But I think, and we can quantify that probably more easily to some degree, but the piece for you to consider and that we need direction on is what sort of investment you want to make in the non-regulatory side to support the implementation of this policy. So, you know, what we have in New Zealand at the moment is a situation where, if you like, some of our policy or regulatory choices are narrowing because of the direction we're getting from central government. But the things that aren't narrowing are the options that you have available to you in terms of the non-regulatory support for those impacted to comply, the support you give to catchment groups and all of those other programs that you might consider. So that's one of the key reasons why we haven't costed this for us, because we need that direction from you.
Okay. So when do you need that direction by?
We will need that direction as part of the LTP. We will have to manage the gap between our current annual plan, the annual plan that's now kicked in, and the first year of the LTP. So we're going to need your direction during this next little while, ultimately before Christmas, in terms of where your priorities are, what sort of investment you want to make, what kind of focus you want to give to the various options you might have around supporting the success of this policy framework moving forward.
Okay. That's a good challenge. Edward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on page 66, second last bullet point, just bearing in mind that regions that have gone ahead of Otago and plan changes and what have you, their ability to collect data and utilise it is running at about 20% on anecdotal evidence anyway. And I just, it's huge in terms of the consents and conditions coming in and the requirement to receive data logging reports and what have you. That is potentially a real blockage in terms of progress. So how is the council prepared to prepare that?
And for the rest of us, I don't quite get all that. Could you sort of elaborate what Edward's just said, please?
Yeah. So I'll speak up. The MPS has required for some time a freshwater accounting system. So you need to be able to account for everything that comes in and goes out. So a lot of that comes through your consent conditions. The volume of data is huge. So it's an issue that we've identified that we'll need to resolve with the environmental monitoring team and our data team. Until the actual NES provisions land, we're not entirely sure how much more system data we're going to need, but we have got a project underway to capture it all. It's going to be a good piece of kit to get that information, to get the systems in place to manage that information that comes in.
Are you talking about telemetry?
No. It's far broader than telemetry.
It's one aspect of it.
So for example, we have to account for all permitted activity takes that occur and permitted activity discharges. We have to be able to quantify all of that sort of information. Yep. Everything has to be able to be accounted. So there's a whole lot of work, even in the stuff that's below the consent threshold, that we have to be able to account across every FMU.
Are we behind in this work compared to other regional councils?
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
a big way.
Go. Yep, carry on, Tom.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think all regional councils are struggling with it, and they recently started a national working group as well, of which ORC, and I believe it's the science team that is taking part in that. Yeah, like especially the bit around monitoring permitted activities is a really hard part. And so I think they'll probably work out some kind of a national model which can be implemented locally.
I think Tom's right. That's part of the story. But the other part of the story is we don't have necessarily the systems or processes to support that either. So we have the data project that we have underway, which is to ensure that we have a fit-for-purpose system to be able to turn our data into information. And I'd like to show you, one of the examples of what we work on at the moment. And I think you'd be somewhat horrified.
Let's do that.
If you were to see that.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about Hilltop. Yeah. So, like we are in a number of areas with this council, we are running to catch up to where we should have been. So, for us, it's always a bigger job because we need to be able to lay the foundations as well as be ready for the implementation. Whereas other councils have done that foundation laying or have done it to a greater degree than we have.
So, I think the implication comes from there. Do we need to go into that in any great detail to inform us of resourcing decisions that you'll need ahead of the LTP?
So we have built the system work in already. That's part of the capital budget for this year. But in terms of the data collection, and the impacts there on, say, for example, the state of environment monitoring and other things, there is a bunch of stuff that we will need to consider.
Oh, sorry.
Yes,
I was just going to add there. So not all. So there's a couple of things here. The provisions aren't gazetted until August, so we don't have the fine detail of exactly the requirements until August. At that point, we will have a look when we have everything on the table, the detail on the table. We will have a look as to whether or not we need anything this year, and if we do, as in this financial year, and if we do, we will come back to you. But Sarah's right. We are doing some work in the background in terms of the Aquarius project and the like, because we are aware that this was on its way. But in terms of needs into the long-term plan, and some of these provisions don't start now necessarily. Some of them start in 2021 or 22, 23. That's where we'll work with you in terms of the long-term plan and what we need in the long-term plan to be able to deliver on it.
Thank you. Councillor Marion and then Councillor Scott.
Okay, there's also the thing about farm plans, and you've got on 10. It's proposed to initiate a work stream to facilitate the implementation of the requirement for farmers in Otago to develop farm plans. I presume you're going to do this through education. And my problem about this is, when talking to a group of farmers in Roxburgh, one woman said very loudly to me, "Oh, a farm plan is just a scrap of paper you attach to the front of your tractor." And I thought, holy shit. And I was really quite perturbed. And she was putting it out there. It was sort of a total disrespect for what the farm plans are, and not knowing that if farm plans aren't done, what will come on is what goes on will be taxed, which is what I said 20 years ago, but never mind.
So what I'll say to that is it's proposed that the work stream will be started, right? So so that's what we are.
This year.
Yep, this year. But I will say, and I don't want to put words into the group's mouth, but one of the things we have discussed, our first question we need to ask ourselves is, what is the role of the council in this, given that we know there is a great diversity across the region in terms of farm plans, right through from good ones to none at all.
Yep.
And then we also know that a number of industry bodies have farm plans as well. So we need to do some work to understand what the value the regional council, there's stuff we have to do, but if we're going to add value in terms of beyond compliance, then we need to do some work to understand where we would add value.
I just said to that.
Sorry, Councillor Bryan.
Oh, sorry.
You were going.
Well, did you want?
Well, if you want to defer.
Well, you get this.
I'll go. Okay. I did have a question in relation to farm plans, and this has been partly answered. I'd just like to kick it off and say that I'm actually, rapt to get another step forward in terms of stopping the degradation of rivers and clean-up of New Zealand rivers and lakes within a generation, which I think is the underlying expectation here. I'm also rapt to see that, there's commentary by this council in terms of how our Plan 8 lines up with the expectations of the NPS and these plans. So thank you to Sarah and Gwyneth and team, for doing that foundation work. So, there's some transparency to our community, to councillors, to central government. Thank you. Thank you in relation to the implementation plan. You go and look at those details in the background in terms of where to from here. Sarah, Gwyneth and team have been busy in terms of policy, science, consents, rural Asian, compliance, comms. So, that's great. Pleased to hear there's some insight on farm plans, because I'm hoping that that's going to be another step forward in terms of this council's involvement. Now, to answer or to respond to CE's question in terms of what are the non-regulatory expectations of this council year, well, I actually think that's a bit of a tough call, and I would like to see some options brought back to this council, because it's such a huge expectation and responsibility. We heard from our new chair this morning saying we're going to get on and deliver on this, and I think all councillors are basically saying that. So my question to the CE, well, what non-regulatory tools are really, what are the options so that we can de-risk it and be very successful, and what is the budget that goes with that? And let's get on with it. And so unless I've missed a page in the report that gives me those options, I'm just saying humbly, thank you, and tell us how we need to support this process, and maybe come back with an appropriate paper in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can come back with our thoughts.
Yeah.
But I also think it's kind of what I've been saying. It's a bit of a theme. We have a number of balls that we're trying to juggle. So we've had the air conversation today. We are having this conversation. We're yet to have a fully in-depth biodiversity conversation once the mapping comes through. And yes, we can bring you ideas and thoughts, but I also think we need some guidance from you about how you want to prioritise those things, because we can bring you a bunch of ideas and thoughts that, you know, cost $20 million,
yeah.
Or we can bring you a bunch of ideas and thoughts that cost $4 million. And I don't know.
Well, how much does the whole project cost today?
Well, I don't know. So what I'm saying is, do you want us to, you know, what the kind of direction we need is, how do you want to prioritise? How do you want to prioritise this? But also, what kind of investment are you thinking about? Are you thinking about, you know, a small targeted rate kind of thing, or are you thinking about borrowing a lump of money so that you can have a $20 million program? And that, you know, I don't know what to bring you until I have some of that sense of what you might be thinking about.
No, wait, Brian, yeah. That is a discussion, seriously, mate, we will have, and we're going to have sooner rather than later. But your point you make is well made. You've got the response of the Chief Executive. Now we're going to await those discussions into the future.
Is that what you just, sorry, is that what Sarah just said?
Correct.
Do you want that discussion now, or are you going to bring us some options later?
Well, what I'm saying is I think we do the two things in parallel, but we've discussed this as an ELT just this week.
Yeah.
Around, okay, so we can, you know, what we're trying to figure out is the best way to do it, right? So one thing we're going to do is we're going to come to you and talk about current state.
Yeah. Yes.
All right? So that everybody knows what current state looks like in a number of these areas, because sometimes I think there's assumptions made and perhaps not everyone's fully informed. So we'll take that opportunity. We discussed at the same time whether we came to you with some of our thoughts. The problem being is that we don't know how big to think. So I'll give you an example. In the biodiversity space, for example, we can think small, like $1 million more dollars into the eco fund, say for example, which gets you more community engagement and small projects in different places, or we can think a regional park. I don't have a sense from you about what that looks like, and so that's what I'm saying. It's hard because it's a bit chicken and egg.
Yeah, that's right. And you also need to mesh all these things too, because you've got work and, as you say,
That's
water,
right.
air, everything else as well, which we're going to let you bring to us in a very near future. And then we're going to make some options, obviously, and put them into our long-term plan. And that is a great discussion we're going to have. But Councillor Kevin, on this particular issue, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah. So on page 67, and going to the farm plans, where you said part of the discussions will get a hold of various stakeholders, and even if you look this morning on farm plans with Wanaka, their whole catchment is doing their own farm plans. Noslam and North Otago are certainly doing that, and other areas are doing that. So they're not new. And most have advanced from the farm plan on the front of the tractor. So, but in reality, I think those plans could all be absolutely relevant unless we actually get a national template that says you must have these included.
That's what's coming.
Yeah, that is coming, isn't it? So it will be a matter of adapting those to it. So that's absolutely spot on. So if I go back into page 73 and just on, and this is probably under investment really, page 73, where you tell me that part of a water consent, if you're pumping more than 5 litres a second, you need to be able to supply data straight back to ORC every 15 minutes. which will cost the average water taker or water user, $10,000 to $15,000 each to get that bit of kit into their system. The part part of the kit's actually relevant unless we've got some very good system here to use that, which I've elaborated. So I'm picking in my head that we're going to be spending $10 to $20 million to actually upgrade and get to that sort of system. So that's the sort of numbers I want to know, that because I believe we have to do it. I mean, I don't think there's any option that we can go to something that's not actually going to do the job, because there's no point having all these figures if we're going to get what Edward's telling us now, a 20% uptake or a 20%. We need to be going bang. We need to be, as Judge Skelton said to us, that we need to be the exemplar, and here's our chance. So I want to know that to get the right system to do that job correctly, what sort of investment will be up for, because that's what we need to aim for, in my opinion.
Okay. On any other questions? Councillor Kate?
Just on your plan change 8 and the fencing thing, which was 5 in the plan change, now suggested in the NPS to be 3. Are you concerned about that being married up together, or what action are you considering? It's not in. You got a suggestion back that it'd be a submission, but it wasn't an action to take. I'm just wondering how you're dealing with that.
So once the NES actually lands, we'll undertake a process of comparing the documents to see how they align, and then if we need to make a staff submission, we will do so. So it's more than just the stock fencing. There's also
the other stuff as well. So you'll do it all at once, yes, and it won't come back to us, or no?
Generally, there are staff technical submissions.
Thank you.
Councillor Gretchen.
Thank you. I was just looking at the implementation plan, and you can't really say just looking at the implementation plan. It's ginormous, and thank you for putting that together. That's a huge step forward, and it's something that we've asked for in the past, and so great to see it laid out there clearly and for the community as well. It's a brilliant tool. What a lot of work, yeah. And I think underestimating the financial impacts across the regional sector, I think, of implementing what is required for looking after our freshwater resources. Trying to mesh all the processes we've got going together at the moment. So the RPS is going in tandem with the long-term plan. And then we've got freshwater policy and all of the background data collection plus everything else going together, community consultation, different stages of that. A huge amount, but I'm trying to figure out, and there is a question here, the RPS and the LTP going together and trying to develop, and I know we're doing that, but when you've got the RPS, you've got community and what their priorities are, and we're going through that process, and then you get the methods of how you're going to do that, and that's then binding, really, of how you're going to do that. And you're also trying to do an LTP at the same time, and we're being asked to prioritise at the same time as the community are being asked to prioritise, and actually the RPS probably has higher weight than our thoughts even will have. But I suppose that's just the reality, and perhaps our LTP will need to be adjusted to reflect that, I suppose. So we're all doing our best, but there's two tandem processes, trying to work out the same things. So, sorry, is there any thoughts to how that comes together is the question.
I agree with you.
It is huge.
It's good work.
Yeah, so
I assume you're going to have a plan.
So through you, Chair, so one of the things that will, when the RPS comes for notification, an implementation plan will come alongside it. And one of the things that Lisa and I have been talking about is having those internal conversations. Policy teams can surprise other teams in the organisation by putting methods in that they weren't aware that they were going to do, that shape their work program. So it's really important that that comes as one piece of work. The timing will be out with the LTP, but there is we can adjust it through annual plans and things like that. So, but it's certainly front and centre, and we've seen a couple of regional councils taken to task for not implementing their RPSs, so we won't be following suit.
Okay. All right. The recommendations are as they are on page 67. There are 4: that we receive this report, that we note this report, that we note the dated implementation plan for Plan Change 8 and for the Action for Healthy Waterways. I'll so move from the Chair. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hope. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against.
Mr.
Carried.
Chairman, just before you leave that, can I just make a plea to the CE? You asking for direction. This is some huge stuff in terms of expenditure. That's all I'm thinking about.
Yes.
And which proportions you put into which programs. And I need, as a relative to new councillor, you know, when you talk about 20 million, I don't know whether that's big or not.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
us.
I need to understand the implications of X going into here, what it means for air quality or urban plans or whatever. Okay, I need to, it's not only this magnificent piece of bloody implementation, but it's the implementation sitting within our other programs. So just a plea I make to you.
Can I suggest something in that to the Chair?
Yes.
Very quickly. $500,000 in the QLDC is 1% rate rise. That was always really clear in my mind as a ratio.
Yeah.
Don't know what it is here.
No.
How much
is it, Chuck? Do you know?
What is it?
General rates are 11.2 million in total.
Yeah.
So 110,000 is 1% of general rates.
Yeah.
Okay, so no time.
So it's not much, right?
No. But it depends on whether what you're talking about is going to be a general rate funded
That's
activity.
right.
Or
Yeah.
That's another whole group.
Yes, because debt is the thing that helps you to get where you want to.
You're not talking.
We're throwing things now.
Now, we are going to close this meeting. Thank you to staff for providing it to us. Tomorrow, Sarah, Gwyneth, who's taking tomorrow? Gwyneth's team are? Could you just quickly give me 2 minutes about what you're doing tomorrow? Edward, are you coming to this tomorrow?
Yep. So tomorrow it's both a strategy workshop and also a regulatory committee, I think. So the strategy workshop is we've been having a series of workshops. I'm sure these guys will introduce this at the start of the day. We had one pre-lockdown where we talked about our mission vision. It was held in the art gallery. We then had one in this room about a month ago, I think, around drafting up the community outcomes. This is the next in those series of workshops, and we will be talking about what ORCs should role and what we should do in delivering on some of those draft community outcomes. It's across the road at the scene.
Oh, where is it today? So we're across the road.
Yeah. Is it 9 o'clock?
Southern Cross Hotel.
Southern Cross Hotel, 9 o'clock
Heritage
tomorrow.
Yeah. Heritage.
Is it catered? Okay, if you just make sure that there's coffee there at 9 o'clock in the morning, that would be really useful.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much for your time, effort and energy. See you tomorrow.